It's 6:30, members of council. Why don't we go ahead and convene this meeting of the City Council for December 7th, 2021. I'd ask you all to please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, however you can comfortably do that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Taking us to the top of the agenda, we'll have a roll call from the city clerk or the council members present.
Cumbie. Come back. Gabriel.
Here.
Harrington.
Here.
O'Doherty.
Here.
Schmeckel.
Here.
Schuster.
Here.
Somerville.
Here.
Pierce.
Here.
Pierce. Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Weaver.
Here.
And Cumbie. Absent right now, but we'll be right back probably.
We'll say excused for the moment.
So for right now, Mayor, that makes 8 present and 1 temporarily out.
All right. Thank you, City Clerk. And the record will reflect when Councilor Cumbie comes back to join the meeting. The City Clerk will note that she's returned, I'm sure. All right. Let's do public comment on non-agenda items. That's public comment on non-agenda items that won't be discussed tonight. If you're here, members of the public, to talk about an item that is on the agenda tonight, you will certainly have that opportunity. This is for any comment that might be related to a different topic that we won't be discussing later on in our agenda. So I know that there are plenty of people here to speak to items that are coming on the agenda, but as is protocol, I want to make sure that you want to talk to us about how much you enjoyed the downtown Christmas Fest parade or something along those lines. Now's the time to tell us that. Don't see any comment on non-agenda items, so I'm going to close the public comment period. Council, I'm going to move to consideration of changes in the agenda. I turn that over to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the following changes to the agenda be approved. On our regular agenda, we are switching items 21 and 22. So 21 or 22 becomes the new 21 and 21 becomes the new 22.
Second.
There's a second from Councilmember Somerville. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I move that the agenda be set as changed.
Second.
Second.
Second from Councilmember Harrington that time. All those in favor, same sign.
Aye.
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 Council members, point of procedure, I'm not sure if I should be asking for opposition votes on those motions for changes in the agenda. When we have a unanimous vote, I don't see the need to do it. All right, let's now move on to the next item, which is item number 6. Doesn't appear that we have any proclamations this evening. Doesn't look like we have a public hearing on, we have one public hearing. I'm going to turn it over to the city clerk for, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we've got a whole bunch of public hearings. I'm going to turn it over to the city clerk for the first public hearing. Point of information. The chair is always seeking good ways to try to run this meeting with multiple screens. So he shrinks the agenda down so it's really, really skinny, and I can scroll through it, but I missed some things. City Clerk, can we have the first notice of the public hearing?
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing of the Laramie City Council will be held Tuesday, December 7th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom meeting for the following purpose. Original Ordinance number 2033, amending LMC Chapter 15.24, adopting the 2021 International Code Series, and updating the language to conform to International Code Series. All information relative to this matter is available for review at the City of Laramie City Clerk's office at 406 Ivinson Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming. Anyone wishing to be heard should be present or may be represented by his or her agent at the meeting.
Thank you, City Clerks. Thank you, City Clerk. So we'll open this up for anyone that has input on this item. Now's the time. Council members, I'm not seeing any hands up in our attendees for comment on this item. So, without objection, I'll close the public hearing on that. Turn it back over to the City Clerk for the reading of the announcement on our second public hearing this evening. City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing of the Laramie City Council will be held Tuesday, December 7th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom meeting for the following purpose. Original Ordinance number 2034, amending chapters 13.44.010 and 13.44.030 of the Laramie Municipal Code to regulate water rates in the City of Laramie. All information relative to this matter is available for review at the City of Laramie City Clerk's office at 406 Ivinson Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming. Anyone wishing to be heard should be present or may be represented by his or her agent at the meeting.
Thank you very much, and we'll go and check with our members of the public and attendees to see if there's any comments, if there are any comments on this item. We go pretty quick with these because we still have two more. Seeing none, council members, without objection, I'll close the public hearing and turn the floor back to the City Clerk for the next announcement.
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing of the Laramie City Council will be held Tuesday, December 7th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom meeting for the following purpose. Original Ordinance 2035, amending chapters 13.48 of the Laramie Municipal Code to regulate wastewater rates in the City of Laramie. All information relative to this matter is available for review at the City of Laramie City Clerk's office at 406 Ivinson Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming. Anyone wishing to be heard should be present or may be represented by his or her agent at the meeting.
We'll go to attendees, members of the public, to see if there are any comments on this item. Seeing none, council members, I'll close the public hearing if there's no objection. And back to the City Clerk for the next notice.
Notice is hereby given that a public meeting of the Laramie City Council will be held at 6:30 p.m. on December 7th, 2021 in City Council Chambers, City Hall, 406 Ivinson Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming. Due to COVID restrictions, meetings will be held on Zoom to take public comments on the following. Original Ordinance number 2036, TA-21-02, a text amendment for R2, R2M, and R3 zoning districts, dimensional standards, and other related corrections within sections 15.10, 15.12, and 15.14 of the LMC in order to correct language in regard to the dimensional changes. The application has been submitted by the City of Laramie. All applications, plans, and specifications relative to these matters are available for review at the City of Laramie Planning Office at 405 Grand Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming. Anyone wishing to be heard should be present via Zoom.
Thank you very much. One public comment on this item for the public hearing. I'd like to recognize Mr. Brett Glass into the meeting and allow 3 minutes for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Imagine that you are sitting in your single-family home in the R2 or R3 zone, and you hear the sound of a bulldozer. When you look out the window, you see it's demolishing the old house next door and clearing the lot. And a short time later, a foundation is poured, and soon after, builders are building what looks like sort of a motel next to your home. The doors to the units are only 10 feet apart, and the flats inside look like once in urban neighborhood were called railroad flats. Narrow, cramped, squalid apartments with no side windows, but only windows in the front and back. Pretty soon, students start moving into some of them, playing loud music at all hours. Large families cram themselves into the one-bedroom units, but you can't complain to the city about them exceeding the occupancy requirements for the R2 and R3 zones, because city codes only limit occupancy by unrelated adults. Cars start coming and going at all hours. You can't park in front of your own home. There's noise, there's trash, there's congestion. You're suddenly living within 10 feet of what is essentially a residential motel. This is one of the scenarios that this ill-conceived ordinance would allow. It would permit the construction of buildings like the one I've just described, or collections of dwellings that look like single-wide trailers, on lots narrower than a standard 40-foot trailer park space in quiet residential neighborhoods. This is completely incongruous, and it will destroy the value of the homes into which residents have poured their life savings. Now, at the introduction of this ordinance, several council members expressed a desire to see more rentable accessory buildings and mother-in-law cottages as a way of creating affordable housing, but that's not what this ordinance would do. Developers who lobbied for this item won't charge less for the more tightly packed dwellings. They'll simply pocket bigger profits. Parents of university students will bid these units up to high prices, inflating prices throughout the market, and the noise, congestion, and traffic generated by this ordinance will destroy the character of Laramie's historic residential neighborhoods. So if you want to encourage the development of affordable housing in the form of small accessory buildings or cottages, please draft an ordinance that will actually accomplish that. But this ordinance would be highly destructive, and it really should be voted down at this reading tonight. Thank you very much.
Further public comment. I'd like to recognize, I'm going to go in order of hands that have been raised. I'd like to recognize Mr. Dave Coffey and allow him into the meeting. Welcome. You have the floor.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. I want to just quickly state that I think the planning staff has done an admirable job pulling this together. I want to remind council also that that your staff crafted this ordinance amendment based upon the input from the various studies that were done, commissioned by the city, related directly to affordable housing. And while I disagree with Mr. Glass, I do think that the intent for this ordinance will do a good job of helping give developers options for future multifamily, or excuse me, future small house residential developments. I think this is needed, and I'm in support of this, and I think the local developers are as well. Appreciate your time.
Okay. Other comments for the public hearing? We've got Miss Wendy Chapman. Would like to recognize Ms. Chapman and provide the floor. Welcome, and you've got the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Wendy Chapman. I live on the west side, which is part of the R2, R3. I think we're mostly R2 over here. I think that this ordinance would only benefit developers. And I also think that our particular neighborhood probably would end up with more of the dense housing. Other R2 and R3 neighborhoods in Laramie, except for West Laramie and the west side would probably get the brunt of it. But the other parts of town with R2 and R3 don't have as many lots to build on, so they wouldn't end up with this dense housing. So I am opposed to this ordinance. I do also have a comment from another neighbor. Can I give that now?
Council members, is there any objection to having that comment provided? Seems like we're okay with that. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, this is from Gina Chavez, and she says, this, and I quote, I object to the proposed R2, R3 change in lot sizes. The change will alter and I believe damage the character of our West Side neighborhood. Unquote. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if there is further public comment on this public hearing. Hey, Clerk, I have an attendee with a screen name of admin account that has a hand up. As always, proper names are useful to the council during public speaking. So if you could please provide your name for the record, and you have the floor.
Thank you, and apologies for the Zoom name. It's on a shared account. This is Nate Martin. I'm a homeowner here in Westside Laramie, and this wasn't a subject I was prepared to speak on tonight, but I feel like there's some kind of impression that the folks who live in the West Side, where I live, are uniformly opposed to increased density, and that's just not true. I, for one, understand that the city is in an affordable housing crisis. I am not an expert on zoning regulation, so I would hope that if this ordinance is meant to facilitate the creation of mother-in-law houses, that's what it would actually do. I haven't admittedly vetted it. But in general, I just, I'm not a supporter of the NIMBY attitude of, build your affordable housing or your dense housing in somebody else's neighborhood. I think that we all got to work it out together. And so I just want to express that comment that folks who live here on the West Side are of diverse opinions and definitely not uniformly opposed to this.
All right. If there's any other comment on this item. Yes, I'd like to recognize Linda Devine. Ms. Linda Devine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I wanted to follow up on some of the previous comments that do live on the West Side. I don't believe that any of them are opposed to affordable housing. As Mr. Martin was just visiting about, I think the concern is the structure of it. And I think it's really important that we take all of that into consideration. Those living on the West Side understand the need for affordable housing. I think the concern is that the developers are going to go in here. And when we talk about affordable housing, it's not necessarily low income housing, and affordable housing anymore is $200,000 for a townhouse, sometimes 300, and that's definitely concerning. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you so much.
All right. Let's see if we have any other comment on the public hearing for this item. council members, are we letting members of the public and the public hearings have multiple speaking times? I'm seeing some objection to that. Yes, Councilmember Harrington.
Mr. Mayor, we have a pretty packed agenda. There would be a second opportunity to speak to this when the item comes up. I think we are best served by following our rules of procedure as written.
I agree. We'll close the public hearing on this item. Having seen no other speakers seeking recognition for their initial time. I do see another hand up, and we'll be recognizing this speaker. I do not have complete screen names, and I can only say I would like to recognize and provide the floor to Janelle. And please provide your name for the public record, and I apologize I couldn't give your full proper name.
My name is Janelle Hansen. And
welcome.
Thank you. I'm having a little technical problem figuring out how to enter this meeting.
Janelle, it's no problem. We all have the council members have been doing this for a while now. We have a technical problem with it just about every meeting, so no worries. Go ahead whenever you feel comfortable.
Anyway, I live right next to the Plains Museum, and I just there's been we live in the historical part of the district, and the parking. It just seems that the remodeling. It seems like people are just remodeling all the, some of the older regulations where you had to have off-street parking and that sort of thing. And as things are impacted here, both the parking and just the amount of people makes the integrity of the neighborhood. It just, for instance, the Plains Museum, someone asked me if they could park in my driveway because they volunteered over at the Plains Museum and they couldn't find a parking place within a 5-block area. And I said that that they were able to, but I said, when there was a car out there, I said, "Is this your car in the middle of the day?" And she said, "No, I'm not volunteering until late at night." And what has happened is that the amount of off-street parking has been compromised so that everything is now on the streets, and it seems that the priority is going to certain people rather than like the Ivinson home where they can't find parking around their own facility in order to run an establishment that would honor the people that they're trying to serve. And anyway, the amount of and it seems like garages. At one time, it was you couldn't remodel a garage, and you had to provide for off-street parking. And part of the reason for that, everybody knows it's a complete nightmare to even go over to the courthouse. And one of the standard things is that they provide, they have, as kind of a reward system, a parking next to the building for people that, I mean, when it just gets to be so congested to that point, and all of these cramming people in at more density like that is, I don't think, going to serve anybody, and especially in a historic neighborhood that we're trying to, make living conditions much more like a neighborhood that serves their people. So.
Thank you for your comments and for taking time to make those comments to the council this evening. Any other comments on public hearing? Seeing none. Close the public hearing. Council members, without objection, we'll close the public hearing. And we will move on to announcements. Do we have any announcements from the city staff?
Thank you, Mayor. We do have 2 announcements this evening from the city manager's office. The assistant city manager will make those.
Thank you very much, City Manager. Let's go to City Manager Fieser. Got the floor.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, I've got a couple of announcements tonight. The first one is related to some recent work done by the parks crews in the Laramie River. As you may have all seen, we did have some beavers develop dams that were obstructing the flow of the Laramie River, causing the water to back up, and actually it causes damage and overcovers part of the green belt, making it impassable during cold weather situations. We had staff out there last week that removed some of the dams to allow water to flow freely. The staff, while they were on site, were accused of killing the beavers, which is absolutely not in our operational standards with City of Laramie. At this time of the year, most beavers are in their dens, so they're not currently out actively doing anything, and we did not do any work around the beaver dens that are located along the Laramie River. Quite frankly, my staff's afraid of one of the beavers because they claim it's as large as a German Shepherd dog. So they try to stay away from it as much as they can. But we do that work, and we have done that work over many years. When we do have the need to move a beaver, we do live trap and then relocate those beavers either into the Pole Mountain area or out onto the Monolith Ranch with approval and permitting through the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. So I just wanted to be clear that the City of Laramie does not currently partake in any killing of beavers while we're conducting some of the work. I'll be happy to answer any questions related to that. Yes, sir.
Assistant City Manager, I very much appreciate this presentation. And I want to just emphasize, this has been the protocol for the City of Laramie regarding the beavers for quite some time. City Manager, Assistant City Manager, I don't know. I know it predates, I know that policy probably predates anybody on this council, that the live trap and relocation to another area has been the policy. I like how the former long-term public, the Parks Director, Paul Harrison, used to give us the update about the problem beavers, and would sort of give us kind of a regular report around this time of year about what's going on. But I really appreciate that time spent on this announcement, because I don't want anyone to have the impression that the City of Laramie has, fatal traps for beavers. We just don't do that. We wouldn't want to do that. This council wouldn't support that. Are there any questions about this?
Honorable Mayor, to follow up with that,
yeah.
we don't actually send any staff out with any intent to harm or kill any beavers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it's important to make that announcement, especially in light of perhaps some misperceptions about our policy around that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. The second announcement I'd like to make you all aware of is that this year the city of Laramie has partnered with Rocky Mountain Power and the Blue Sky program. And we'd like to announce that our holiday lights are going green this season with help from participants from Rocky Mountain Power's Blue Sky Renewable Energy program. The environmental benefits of this program represent a reduction of 1,117 pounds of CO2 emissions that would be associated with the electricity used for our holiday lights. Basically, what the Blue Sky program does is they purchase renewable energy credits in the amount equivalent to the amount of the energy consumption that would be done by your holiday displays. We'd encourage everybody, if you're a Rocky Mountain Power customer, you can support renewable energy to match some or all of your electricity used at home by participating in the Blue Sky Renewable Energy Program and by visiting RockyMountainPower.net Blue Sky to learn how to do this. So I'm pretty excited about that partnership because it is a continuation of our carbon neutral initiative and is a free program offered by Rocky Mountain Power Blue Sky. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the Assistant City Manager on this initiative? I think it's nice to try to find ways to balance people's enthusiasm for the holidays with an eye towards a little bit of that responsibility for energy use that we're focused on here in Laramie. So it doesn't always have to be the either or. Any other questions or comments? Yep, Councilmember O'Doherty, I thought you might.
Doesn't Assistant Manager Feeser have another announcement pertaining to Blue Sky?
Looks like you caught him off guard there, Councilmember.
Didn't we get our grant?
Actually, Honorable Mayor, we had announced that we had done that through council action earlier, but to follow up with Councilor O'Doherty, we were the recipient of our grant application to provide for 25 kW solar array and electric vehicle charging at Fire Station 3. I'm about to put that project out for RFQ, and we hope to have that completed by June of 2022, if that's next year. So, yep, we're super excited to get that project rolling, and thank you for putting that out there for the public, Councilor O'Doherty.
Councilmember O'Doherty knows that we have people in Laramie that want to keep track of that. They want to know about it. The Assistant City Manager knows that as well, too. There's just always a lot going on. That's good. We did have a recent email from a member of another community that frequently visits Laramie that was asking about the availability of charging stations, and so I think people are looking forward to those kinds of things. Thank you. City Manager, does that get us through announcements from staff? Okay. Council members, we'll move on to the next item. Are there any disclosures by City Council members that they need to make on any of the items on the agenda this evening? Council Member Schuster.
Thank you. On our consent agenda, there is a WyoTech approval, and even though it will not get me any kind of money or any other things on that, I will put myself not in the vote on item 9J. I will ask to be recused, and just because of what it would look like. So I'm asking to be recused from 9J on the consent agenda.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Schuster, and for your explanation about it. Councilmember O'Doherty.
I just want to disclose that I have a rental, but I also have a water bill, so I don't know if I'm supposed to bow out of this discussion, but I would like to stay in it about the rentals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. A disclosure, perhaps with a little bit of an argument about disclosures included within it. We'll leave it up to you. Other disclosures on items on the agenda. All right. Oh, yes, Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to disclose that I have rental property and I also have a water bill.
Thank you. Councilmember Schmeckel.
I join the crowd of having rental units and a water bill.
Thank you, Councilmember Schmeckel. Councilmember Gabriel.
I have a water bill.
and a little bit of a sense of humor. All right. Do we have any other disclosures on any of the other items coming before the council this evening? Councilmember Schuster, you know the drill for how to handle that vote on the, okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And we do appreciate the attention towards people kind of letting people know what their affiliations are and what they want people to know about their interest in any given topic. That's why we have that on the agenda. We don't use it very much. Sometimes it's relevant. We can now go to the vice chair for item number 8.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the consent agenda be approved and that each specific action on the consent agenda be approved as indicated.
Second.
That was a motion, a second from Councilmember Cumby. Go to a roll call vote. City Clerk.
Cumby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes on all items except for 9J, and recuse me on that one, please.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
that's 9 yeses, but 1 with a recusal from 9J. So technically 8 full yeses, Mayor.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. Yeah, that's a tough one for reporting back on the vote total. We appreciate it and we accept that. Understand. Let's now go to the regular agenda. I'm going to recognize Councilmember Somerville for item number 11.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that City Council approve Resolution 2021-73, establishing December 23rd, 2021 and January 3rd, 2022 as city observed holidays and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second.
Vice Mayor, who was my second on that? I don't know.
I think it was Councilor Harrington.
All right, Councilmember Harrington with the second on that item. Councilmember Somerville, you saw it before.
Thank you, Mayor. I bring this resolution for consideration of the council, as the mayor alluded to during our pre-meeting, as kind of this is an annual tradition to try to recognize the hard work of the city staff over the year. And I want to pause and just reflect that 2021, the entirety of the year, we have been in a global pandemic with quite a bit of stress. There's been a lot of extra work from city staff, and certainly a lot of stress on our employees trying to balance everything that comes with being in a global pandemic, work, school, kids, COVID testing, the whole 9 yards, as we've all tried to work our way through the pandemic. And so I am asking the council to consider giving 2 extra days off to the city staff as I guess as a gesture for that hard work. And the reason that I chose time off is just to really, as the city manager addresses in the cover sheet for this item, giving them some additional time to spend with their families and to take some time off and really try to give them some additional wellness time, if we want to call it that, but just really to show our appreciation for all their continued hard work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councilmember Somerville. Are there other comments? Will the council let me make one? Which is just that, as Councilmember Somerville talked about over the last couple of years, it's been pretty rough. Something else I think we've heard quite a bit about, both in the private and the public sector, is workers and the value of workers in whatever department and whatever job, and the need to respect people, make sure that they are treated well, that they have living wages, which the city of Laramie very much pays attention to the best of our ability within our budgets, to make sure that they have those kinds of benefits and that respect from their employer, with an eye towards things like wellness, time with family, a work environment that doesn't put them at risk and doesn't jeopardize their personal safety, and that these are reasonable things for workers in any job, in any sector of the economy to expect. And, the city of Laramie, we're a drop in the bucket when it comes to the national economy, but we I think, and our city management for many years now has tried to do our best to acknowledge those things and provide that respect for our city employees. And this is just one of those other little things that, we can't do much, but it's one thing that we can do. We don't get that many opportunities to have a direct thank you opportunity to the employees. We do thank them, all of them, every department. And I appreciate Councilmember Somerville for bringing this item forward. Thank you very much. City Manager. And then I'll go to you too, Councilmember Gabriel. City Manager, do you want to hear from Councilmember Gabriel, or do you have something you'd like to say? Okay.
Please,
Councilmember Gabriel, go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I was just curious. I was reading through. I didn't see anything about trash pickup and recyclables. Will they be just pushed ahead then?
So I guess we'll have the city manager roll that answer into whatever she was going to say, and we'll recognize city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. With respect to trash pickup and other city services, they have, I believe, just last week published the collection schedule. If the council vote in favor of this resolution and it requires any modification to that pickup schedule, we will make those announcements to the public yesterday. I do not, however, believe that it does. And if the Public Works Director is on, I'm trying to see if he's here and wanted to address that. He's certainly welcome to. Yes, Mr. Webb.
Mr. Webb, if you want to, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, Honorable Mayor, City Council, when Solid Waste put out their schedule last week, they didn't know this was coming forward. But either way, the trash collection on these days will remain the same. We can't, over the holidays especially, we can't go 2 days without collecting trash, obviously. So it'll remain the same. There may be some hours adjusted at the landfill, but as far as trash collection, that'll move forward as planned.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Just going to quickly reiterate thanks and recognition of the importance of workers across sections of the economy. City Manager Jordan, you still have the floor.
Mayor and Council, I just wanted to express on behalf of staff our appreciation for the council even bringing this forward regardless of the outcome. And I do believe that this is certainly warranted recognition for our staff. So thank you for having this conversation and for recognizing the hard work all of the folks here do every day.
Thank you, City Manager. Is there any further comment? I think we'll check and see if there's a public comment, Council, if there's nobody else in the queue. Yo, Councilmember Cumby, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to commend our city staff for the way they have conducted themselves during the past almost 2 years of dealing with the pandemic and the service that they have provided, and have made sure that there has been no interruption in our services, and things have been, it's just amazing to me the effort that has gone into keeping our city going and to keeping things operationally smooth. And I thank all of the staff very much, and I think this is but a small token. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Cumby. Council members, staff members, members of the public, I hope that you'll extend that time for the council members to make a couple of comments on something like this, because there are not that many occasions where we can provide a thank you message for everybody, and then couple it with something that might be of significance to our staff, like those couple of extra days. And the city staff is appreciated very much, and I know that the residents in Laramie appreciate it when they're out there making sure that the water lines are repaired when they break in the middle of the winter, that the garbage is picked up during the holiday season without a lot of breaks in service and doesn't pile up, that the beavers are relocated safely out into the woods instead of trapped in a mean way. All of those things. So, if we make a couple extra comments, and I guess it's particularly for attendees, we ask that you just bear with us, because we do like to take advantage of those rare opportunities to thank the city staff. I don't see any hands up for public comment on the topic. I think those staff members know that they're valued. Why don't we go to without objection, council, why don't we go to a roll call vote on this item? Okay, City Clerk?
Humby,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. That motion carries. And again, a big thanks for city staff, across departments, and from the top down and the bottom up. It's all important. We're going to go to item number 12, and I'd like to recognize Councilmember O'Doherty.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I'll be reading that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm seeing now a message that Councilmember O'Doherty needs to preserve her voice. We're going to recognize Councilmember Cumby, and I understand.
Yes. I move to amend something previously adopted at the October 19, 2021 regular meeting, approving a professional services agreement with Syntec Consulting Incorporated for the joint City of Laramie and Albany County Casper Aquifer Protection Plan update in the amount of $277,500 plus a contingency of $47,500 for a total not to exceed amount of $325,000 by substituting the previous agreement with the newly revised version approved by the attorneys and authorized by the mayor and clerk to sign. Thank you.
Second.
A motion and a second from Vice Mayor Pierce. Thank you. I'd like to recognize the city manager.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council. I would note that Darren Parkin, the city's Natural Resources Administrator, is here this evening. Darren has actually been running point on the contract negotiations that are necessary to update your Casper Aquifer Protection Plan and prospective protection measures. The motion here is simple and I think fairly straightforward. You previously approved this document, but if you do have any questions, either myself or Darren are happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Let's see if we have some questions. We have a question from Councilmember O'Doherty. Go ahead, Council.
I just want people to notice the amount is the same. It's just the text in the contract. Thank you.
Yes, for those that might be having trouble with the audio, or I know Councilmember O'Doherty's having a little bit of trouble with their voice, the amount, the point there was the amount is the same. This adjustment is not changing that. Other questions for the city manager or Mr. Parkin, our natural resource manager? Okay. City Manager, you still have your hand up for the floor. I don't know if you have any additional comments that you want to. Okay. Why don't we check and see if there's any public comment on this item? Seeing none, Council, we'll close the public comment on the item. Mr. Parkin, thanks for taking some time to be here. Is there anything you want to add to the Council discussion about this project since you've made yourself available for the item?
Honorable Mayor and Council, no, I don't have much else to add. This is, like I say, an amendment to a contract you originally approved October 19th. I will say that this was on the agenda for the county commissioners at their meeting this morning for approval. These minor changes to the indemnification part of the contract have been approved by both the city and the county attorney. Pretty simple language changes, and that's really all this is.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parkin. And for the update on that. Know that we're council members of the public, both in the city and the county, and all over our community are eager to see the results of this process when we get to them down the road. All right, any other questions or comments here? Members of council? All right, thank you very much. City Clerk, can we please have a roll call vote on this item?
Humby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster, Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk. That takes us to our next item, which is item number 13. I'd like to recommend Vice Mayor Pierce.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to remind everybody we have two motions to work through tonight. So here's the first. I move the City Council approve a contract between the City of Laramie, Wyoming and Tyler Technologies for the selection of new ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning software, professional services, third-party hardware, and data conversion, totaling one-time fees of $813,912, of which community totals $150,894, and finance other totals $663,018, and a contingency for optional services of $316,088, for a total not to exceed amount of $1,130,000, and approve reoccurring SAAS fees for FY 2022 are $81,450, and amend the FY 2022 budget and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Second.
Thank you. I hope I got all that right.
Excellent work, Vice Mayor Pierce. I'm sure you did a better job than I would have. Thank you. Second from Council Member Somerville. Any questions on that procedure as outlined by our Vice Mayor there? I think she got it for us, and I know we have some staff background on this. So I'm going to go to Chief Operating Officer Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and good evening. This has been a long time coming. Our current software is over 20 years old. It is a lot of the modules in it is being sunset, so we're scrambling to try to come up with a new technology and software. We're trying to modernize our business practices and really have more robust data and customer service for our employees and also the citizens. The history of this item started in 2019. At that time, we hired Coa Hills Consulting. They helped us map all our processes from as is to be, so we could modernize where we wanted to go. We got that accomplished in August. We then went through in May of 2020, also with Coa Hills Consulting, and we did a script which is required of all the things you would ask of a vendor for all these modules, and to get into the process of an RFP process. And we started that in February 15th of 2021. We had pre-bid conferences. We had questions. We notified and did a short list of vendors. We actually went through the script with a couple vendors, and we chose Tyler Technologies and we're now at the contract stage for that. I just wanted to go over some of the modules that, how big this integrated solution is. Basically, in the finance area, we have the chart of accounts, we have cash receipting, accounts payable, accounts receivable, P cards, budgeting, purchasing, inventory, bid management, capital assets, project and grant control, contract management. And that's just one set of series. We will be doing also human resource and payroll. There's a lot going on with community where we have mobile inspections, and planning review will now be modernized. So there's a lot to this ERP solution, and it's going to take several years. We picked Tyler Technologies. I've been working with Maddie McCambridge, and she is the account executive for Tyler. And so I can, there's a lot of information in this package. And so if I can introduce Maddie, she can give you a little overview, or we can just start with questions and she'd be happy to answer anything.
Thank you. Thank you. I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and let the guests kind of provide whatever additions to your background there that they might. I see that we also have Mr. Mike Monroe here for this part of the discussion as well. And so I'll turn it over. I'll turn it over there to Maddie McCambridge, and then Mr. Monroe, Mike Monroe, if either of you want to add to it. Now's your time, Ms. McCambridge. You're up first.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council. And thank you, Malia, for inviting us to participate in the meeting this evening. On behalf of Tyler, I just want to let you know that we're very excited to work with the city on this very important and transformational project. As Malia indicated, it's going to be a lot of work. So a lot of hard work, and we're looking forward to that. We're also looking forward to the expansion of our partnership, our existing partnership with the city. If you're not familiar, Tyler Technologies, we are the leading provider in the United States for government software. So that's all, you're who we work with primarily through for our customers. So, we want to be a partner in implementing technology to help drive efficiencies for your operations, both internally and for serving your citizens. So with that, Honorable Mayor and City Council, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Ms. McCambridge? Okay, why don't we, I want to say quickly too, that this is really one of those extremely long-term discussions and projects for the city. We're talking about completely overhauling and replacing all the systems that our chief operating officer just described to us. This isn't one of these things where we make a decision about that quickly, the staff makes a decision about that quickly, because it's a systemic operational issue for the city. So there's a lot going on there. Mr. Monroe, I see that you're here, and I want to give you that same opportunity to add anything. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Our partnership began in 2019 with the city to do the as-is and to-be mapping, and to come up with functional requirements, as Malia mentioned. And it was quite an undertaking. My team, I'm the CEO and founder of Coa Hills, but I have a team of people who are experts in each of their respective areas, whether that's human capital management, payroll, utility billing, community, et cetera. They did interviews, and a great deal of time was devoted from city staff members to working with us over the course of time to tell us every single detail of what they did on a daily basis, so that we could look for ways, for opportunities for improvement. This is the culmination of that and the beginning of the new chapter, which is a new system implemented to its fullest. Our role will be to be the city side project managers and to watch out for to make sure we stay on task and on budget, to make sure that the change is fully embraced by the users, which so far we've had tremendous receptiveness from various city members. So I am open for any questions you have for our team as well, Mr. Mayor and Council, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that comment about this project as well. I don't think there's any area of city operations. I guess I'd ask Malia Brown about this. I don't think there's any area of operations that isn't going to be affected by this changeover. Is that fair to say?
I think every employee will be affected, just from the payroll perspective.
Yeah, just from the payroll perspective alone.
Payroll, HR, we're going to have an employee portal and citizens. I mean, I think everyone in the city will be affected somewhat with this ERP, some more than others, but everything's changing, so everyone's going to have to learn new things.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think I wanted to bring up that part of this discussion just to emphasize that it's no small deal. It's a big change. It's going to be a big rollout, and it's something that I think the staff has been working on for a long time, trying to anticipate how to make it the easiest change possible given the scope and the scale of it. Other questions on this topic since we have our folks here? I think there's a lot of trust in that process and how much time that's taken to be thorough about this process. Let's see if we have public comment on this topic. Seeing none, we'll go back to the council before we go to a vote. Just quickly, council, any other questions or commentary on the topic? Okay. Big deal, but there'll be more to hear about it probably moving forward. City Clerk, we have a roll call vote on the item.
Somerville.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. Vice Mayor, you still have the floor for this item. Oh, that motion carries.
Yep. Thank you. This is our second piece, item 1B. I move that City Council approve a contract between the City of Laramie, Wyoming and KOA Hills Consulting in relation to the new ERP Enterprise Resource Planning Statement of Work, including project and change management, community development, subject matter expert, training development with tools and client assistance totaling $944,300, of which enterprise community totals $303,450,000, and finance other totals $640,870,000, and amend the FY 2022 budget and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Second.
Second from Councilmember Somerville. I'm going to go to the city clerk, and then I'll go to the chief operating officer. City clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to confirm with our motion maker that it was $944,300, of which enterprise and community totals $303,450, and finance other totals of $640,870. Just wanted to confirm those amounts.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, City Clerk. Vice Mayor, of course, that's what you wanted to include in your motion, and the second, I'm sure, agrees. Let's go to Chief Operating Officer Brown. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor, and we already introduced Mike Monroe, the owner and president of Coa Hills, who's been a real partner with us for the last couple of years, and I appreciate all the things he does for us. To make this successful, we definitely still need our help, his help in rolling out this implementation. We're going to have limited city staff. If you just look at the finance modules, we have our full-time jobs. Jennifer Way, different people have full-time jobs, and we're going to be setting up software, converting data, and things like that. And so we're using Coa Hills' expertise in project management, and also in the community, they're also going to be a technical lead just because they don't have people to really lead on the community side. We're also going to have them help train. The thing about us is we're central. So, training your staff on chart of accounts, but training the entire city on new chart of accounts is a different matter and still trying to keep everything together. And so they have skills to develop training tools for us and things, and I think it'll be very successful. And what we want is to have success in this implementation, and it not just be the core staff, but to have it successful to all the departments. And like I said, these contracts are over 3 to 4 years, so I think it's a real service to have them. So that's my question. I don't know if you want any questions now that I've introduced more information to Mike, but that's where we're at.
No, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I think what I heard there is that our city staff does not have the capacity to add the rollout of a new IT management system in addition to everything else that they're supposed to do for the city every day during the course of this rollout. And we're going to need that help, and we're glad to have it. And it sounds like it's been a productive relationship so far. Other questions for our staff or Mr. Monroe on any of the rest of this process? We're hoping it goes really smoothly. I know, but it sounds like there's been a lot of work and a lot of planning to try to make sure it goes as smooth as it can. So we appreciate that. Let's see if there's any commentary from the public on this item before we get to the vote. Doesn't look like it. We have a roll call vote on this item, please, City Clerk.
Gumby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk. Moving to the next item on the agenda, which is another Finance Committee related item. It's going to be introduced to us by Councilmember Schuster. You've got the floor.
Thank you. The title of this is Original Ordinance Number 2037, authorizing the issuance of City of Laramie, Wyoming General Obligation Bonds, Series 2021, in the principal amount of $4,135,000 for the purpose of paying costs of planning, designing, and construction of city projects approved by the voters at the election held on August 21st, 2018, and paying costs of issuing the bonds, prescribing the form of said bonds, and authorizing city officials to execute the same, providing for the pledge of specific perfect sales and use tax revenues for the payment therefor, awarding the sale of the bonds, approving the private placement memorandum, and declaring an emergency. I move to approve Original Ordinance Number 2021-2037, authorizing the issuance of the City of Laramie, Wyoming, of General Obligation Bonds, Series 2021, in the principal amount of $4,135,000 for the purpose of paying costs and planning, designing, and construction of city projects approved by the voters of the election held on August 21st, 2018, and paying costs of issuing the bonds, prescribing the form of said bonds, authorizing the city officials to execute the same, providing for the pledge of specific perfect sales tax and use tax revenues for the payment thereof, awarding the sale of the bonds, approving the private placement memorandum of and declaring an emergency, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Second.
Motion, second from the Vice Mayor. I'm going to go once again to our Chief Operating Officer, Millie Brown, for the background on this. Go right ahead. You got the floor.
Yeah, just a short background, and then I'll give it to the people who are actually doing all the work. So basically, Mayor, we have, we reviewed the SVT tax bonding for certain projects, and we had decided last year that we're going to split up in 2 bonding. This is the second bonding for projects. We're doing some street work and some facility work and some park and trail work that we're bonding. And we had discussed that at our last meeting on November 16th, where we had talked about a private placement, and council agreed to go ahead with the bonds. And at that point, we went and did a notice of intent to sell bonds, and we started the process. And we went and had Todd Bishop with Kaiser and Company has done a lot of work with the local banks, and he got bids back from the bonds. And so I'm going to turn it over to him, and he can explain exactly we did get some good rates, and he'll be happy to explain all that. And then Rick can go into our next steps if we need to. So go ahead, Todd.
You bet. Thank you, Malia. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. As Malia had mentioned, this is really a follow-up to our November 16th meeting, at which time you passed that resolution of intent calling for the issuance and sale of these bonds. Since that time, we prepared what we call a placement summary, which we distributed to all of the banks in Albany County, as well as across the state of Wyoming, to entities that we knew were actively purchasing these types of bonds and investments. So within this placement summary that was distributed to the banks, there was what we call a subscription form document. And on this subscription form, the banks would subscribe, if you will, for the maturities and the interest rates at which they would be willing to buy the City of Laramie bonds. So I'm pleased to report back to you that we received 7 bids back from banks all over the state of Wyoming, actually. We had submittals from Buffalo, of course, right here in Laramie, Cheyenne, as well as far away as Grable, Wyoming, believe it or not. So that I put together a document for you that will illustrate those, but I'm not sure if you have that, but I'll just tell you what those results were. So compiling the bids from those 7 different banks, we had ended up with 4 different banks that were going to win those maturities. So it was First Northern Bank of Wyoming, which is in Buffalo, Wyoming Bank and Trust in Cheyenne, Points West Community Bank, based in Torrington, as well as A&B Bank in Laramie. A&B Bank won the lion's share of those bids. They ended up purchasing about $3,145,000 of those bonds. So on an average interest rate, what that amounts to is we're talking about rates ranging from a 0.20% to about a 1.34% on the long end. So when you average those rates in, that's an average fixed rate of borrowing of about 1.06% for the entire time that these bonds will be outstanding. So really think the City of Laramie did fantastic as far as the bidding. It was the rates that the city received was well under the scale that I anticipated we would receive. So really, we couldn't be much happier with those results. I think it's one thing for me to tell you we did well, but I included for your review on page 7 of my handout some comparisons of bonds that were actually sold that same week in the market. And I can tell you, we privately placed these bonds with banks around the state, so we didn't incur additional cost and expense such as bond rating fees or bond insurance and costly disclosure documents that you sometimes have to have if you wanted to sell these bonds in smaller denominations or sell them to individuals. So, on that document I passed out, I think you'll see that issues that sold that same week that were rated AA minus, AA from Nebraska, Kentucky, Ohio. We are well under the scale of those bonds that were sold at the same time frame. So just wanted to have some comparables for you to illustrate just how well that the city did with this. And so given your approval of the ordinance this evening, we will put together the necessary closing documents. There will be some signatures that are going to be required, but we anticipate closing the transaction on December 15th, at which time the banks who purchase those bonds will send the money in. It will be put into a project fund, and those funds will be available to construct those various projects. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Are there questions on this part of the item, or this part of the item? Council, is it okay to sort of make a general statement about one of the reasons that this has been set up this way is to make sure those projects can move forward sooner rather than later to the issuance of the bonds, as opposed to waiting for the long-term collection of revenue, right? Makes sense. We need to get to these things. Some of that infrastructure is not in a position to wait much longer. So, other questions? Seeing none, I'm going to go back to Chief Operating Officer Malia Brown to see if there's anything else that you want to add to this part of the discussion.
I don't have anything to add.
All right. We'll see if there's any comment from the members of the public in attendance. Seeing none, back to the council one last time for any questions or comments. Yes, Councilmember O'Doherty.
I just want to thank the team for the work on this, and that Laramie has such good standing in the bonds market because of the good work you all do, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Right, and I think it's also always appropriate in the context of this discussion, and the previous comment reminded me of it, to of course thank the residents, rate and taxpayers of the city of Laramie for their willingness to make these investments into the community, into the infrastructure, to keep things functioning, to keep service levels high, and what we want to see here in the city. So our thanks, of course, extend all the way back to the people that decided this ballot question, all the way to this moment tonight where we're figuring out how we're going to do this, and hearing some good news about the bond rating. So we appreciate it very much. Why don't we go to roll call vote on this item?
Schmeckel.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Cumbie.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes,
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
that motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk. We're going to now move on to the next item on the agenda, item number 15. I'm going to turn it over and give the floor to Councilmember Gabriel. Thank you for being here, our guest on the previous item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember
Thank you,
Gabriel.
Mayor. You bet. Here we go. This is item number 15. The title is the Regional Emergency Response Team number 3 grant agreements. I move that council approve the reallocation of funds to the Regional Emergency Response Team number 3 from the 2018-2019 Wyoming Office of Homeland Security Grant Awards in the amount of $114,002.93, and authorize the mayor, city clerk, and city attorney to sign.
The second motion and a second from Councilmember Schuster. I see that we've got the fire chief, Mr. Johnson, Chief Johnson here this evening. Would like to recognize him for the background on the item.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, just a little background on this item. The City of Laramie Fire Department houses for the State of Wyoming Office of Homeland Security Regional Response Team number 3. It's one of 8 teams in the state.
We operate, we do an annual application for a grant through the Homeland Security. And out of those grants, we use that money for training, equipment, and exercises. We had 2 grants open when the pandemic hit, and 18, just to back up a little bit, the grants have performance periods of 2 to 3 years. Both these grants have performance periods of 2 years. So the 18 grant expired in June 30th of 2020, and the 2019 grant expired in June 30th of 2021. It was very difficult. All training was shut down. There was no travel. It was very difficult to spend the money on the grants. Of the 2018 grant award was originally for $100,500. We ended up with $7,739.33 remaining out of that grant. We came close to spending all that one, but didn't quite make it. And then the 2019 grant, we didn't expend any of it. So working with Homeland Security, their office, they've reallocated. What you have before you tonight is a reallocation of those same funds, those leftover funds, and new grant awards that they'll both expire June 30th of 2022. I stand for any questions.
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate the background. Questions? Relatively straightforward item. See if there's any public comment. Seeing none, Council, back to you one more time. Make a short comment about how we're glad to see this item making progress and getting toward the end of the process for it. I think the Chief's been working on it for quite some time. All right, let's go to a roll call vote.
Cumbie,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. That motion carries. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve original ordinance number 2030 on third and final reading, vacating approximately a 102,500 square foot area of right-of-way, including a portion of Lewis Street, 11th Street, 12th Street, and the alley within, and adjacent to Block 2, University Place Edition, as recommended by the Planning Commission.
Second.
Second from Councilmember Somerville. Councilmember Harrington, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to postpone original ordinance number 2030 on third and final reading to the January 18th, 2022 regular City Council meeting.
Second.
Motion and second from Councilmember Somerville. We're going to go to Mr. Cheney for what has become a somewhat familiar staff background on this item. Mr. Cheney, you've got it.
Mayor, Council, thank you. As noted in past meetings, the MOU between the city and the UW has not been completed to the satisfaction of the city, and so we are recommending postponement until those items are completed, and we are hoping that's January 18th, 2022. That's all I have. I can take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cheney, for that. Are there any questions on this item? We've seen it a couple of times before, council members. Right. Following procedure, we'll see if there's a comment from the public on this item. Seeing none, we will go back to council one more time. And we'll go to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Cumbie.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Schuster. Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk. Let's go to the next item on our agenda. And for that, I'd like to recognize Councilmember O'Doherty.
I move that council approve the second reading of original ordinance 2033, amending chapter 15.24, adopting the 2021 International Code Series and updating language to conform to International Code Series.
Second.
Motion and a second from the Vice Mayor. And I'd like to recognize our staff folks. I don't know who's taking the lead on this, if that's going to be our fire code or Clarice from. I'm not sure. I'm not sure who to recognize first, so I'll recognize you both, and you've got the floor. Thanks for being here.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, this is just a second reading of adopting the 2021 IFC and code series. The state has already adopted, and we have 6 months to adopt. So.
Thank you very much. Straightforward background on this item, and one that we do every few years or so. Any questions for our staff folks? And again, I want to thank you both for being here and giving us that update. It's how we do our business so people know what's going on. So we thank you for your patience and for your time being here. Why don't we see if there's any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll go back to the council one more time. All right. City Clerk, may we have a roll call vote on this item?
Somerville,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schuster, Schuster, Schmeckel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Cumby,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. That motion carries. Takes us to our next item on the agenda. Item number 18, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve second reading of original ordinance number 2034, amending chapters 13.44.010 and 13.44.030 of the Laramie Municipal Code to regulate water rates in the city of Laramie. Thank you.
Second.
Second from the Vice Mayor. Motion and a second from the Vice Mayor. I'd like to recognize our Chief Operating Officer for the background, Malia Brown. Thanks again.
Hi. The Mayor and Council, this is second reading. We had a work session with Raptilius, our rate consultant. Todd Cristiano, he is here again tonight if we have any questions. We had that work session on November 9th. We also had a public hearing, which we did not hear from anyone, but basically this ordinance is recommending in 22 a 4% rate requirement, which equates to about $1.95 for the average residential user per month. So that's where we're at. And if you have any questions, Todd or I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Council members? One question that I've asked over the course of this process that I think is good for city residents to hear is the amount of time since the last rate increase. I think we determined at the last meeting it's been 4 years.
Yeah, it was 2018.
Okay, we appreciate that. So coming up on that time frame. City Manager, the other question I have for you is that for third reading, when this comes up, if we could get that, if it's not already available in this item, that chart of the infrastructure breakages that were happening in the previous period before the new rate structure program was introduced, and how that's tracked since the new rate structure program has been in place. I think that's useful for people to understand the background of where we got to where we are today, where we were to where we are today, and the infrastructure needs for the city.
Certainly, Mayor and Council, we'll have that ready for you.
I think it's a good item to have for the council and for members of the public that may want to take a look at that. Council members, other questions? Public on this item. Let's see if we have any public comment. Seeing none, we'll go back to the council. Seeing no member seeking the floor. Yes, Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you. It has been a long time. It's been 3 years since we've had to do this rate, but I think the public needs to know a couple things. I hate to see rate increases. I will be supporting this one though, but we had a couple things happen here in the last couple of years, and one of them is that the university is not using the water they used to because they dug their own well. So we lost a lot of income there. So people need to know that we have to have money to run this system. It is a business. It's a water business. And some of our things, we're trying to make improvements for tanks, additional tanks. Laramie is growing slowly, even though the census doesn't show us growing. We are growing, and the census is extremely wrong, but we have to worry about water. We have to look 20 years forward in water, and that's one of the reasons why this is happening this time, is we have to be prepared for what City of Laramie will look like in 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. Good comments. And the reason we want to emphasize those kinds of things is because the council does not look forward to rate increases. Nobody in the community looks forward to rate increases. But we know from past experience, it's better to keep up with it every few years than to defer that maintenance and those rate increases that are required to pay for it for long periods of time, because that ends up making things much more expensive. One other document, City Manager, before I go to you and provide you with the floor, one other document I think would be nice, if it's not already included in the packet, there's a few things here that I haven't had time to look through, is the cost comparison that we requested from our consultants for similar communities. I think that's useful and helpful for people to be able to look at so that they kind of understand. Yes, City Manager, if I could, I'd like to, yeah, go ahead.
We do have that information, and we sent it to you, but if you want us to put it on the agenda center, we can.
That's my request, is for that comparison information to be made available, because I think it's important for that information to be out there, because I do think sometimes we have concerns presented to us about what goes into the making of Laramie's water rates, and I think that's helpful for those people that are curious. They can have some more information to look at. So I appreciate that. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. The Public Works Department just sent me that rate history, and so we can email that to you, load it to the file for third reading, or we could screen share it with you this evening. I've shared it with the clerk. Or all three of the above.
What I think we'll do, since we have such a jam-packed agenda tonight that's already going a little bit over time, and I know we have a lot of members of the public here eager to speak on items on the agenda, I think I'd ask you to just attach that and make it available through the Agenda Center on the city website, and that'll be a good place to go. We'll make sure, perhaps we'll have an opportunity to do a screen share on that for the third reading, and maybe go over some of that detail a little bit. Appreciate that, though.
Very good. Thank you.
Other questions on this item before we go to the City Clerk, Council? City Clerk, please remind me, did we already go to the public on this item?
I do have it written in my notes that you did, Mayor.
All right, and Councilmember Schuster's giving me a nod. Thank you very much. City Clerk, can we have a roll call?
Cumbie,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Schuster, O'Doherty,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk. Going to the next item on the agenda is item number 19. Going to recognize and provide the floor for Councilmember Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve second reading of original ordinance number 2035, amending chapter 13.48 of the Laramie Municipal Code to regulate wastewater rates in the city of Laramie.
Second.
The second motion and a second from the Vice Mayor. Council, I think a lot of our previous comment can also apply to this issue. When we do water and wastewater, we're talking about a lot of the same things that go into the structure and the development of those items and bringing them forward in an effort towards keeping those low, but with an eye towards that 20-year infrastructure responsibility that was referenced by another council member earlier. City Manager, I see you raise your hand for recognition. I'd like to give you the floor. Oh, okay. It must be just a hangover hand from the last time. Council members, any further discussion? I'd like to recognize Malia Brown.
Yes, Mayor. This, once again, we did have the wastewater also presented by Reftilius on November 19th work session. We went through in detail the wastewater financial plan, and the revenue requirement is that they're recommending for 22 is 4%. Overall, it's about $1.23 to the average residential user per month. And once again, Todd Cristiano is here available for questions.
Council members? I will make one comment. The reason that we try to be really deliberate and emphasize a couple of points of this conversation is because over the 20 and 25 year infrastructure path that the city of Laramie has been on, we do really want to emphasize that the goal here is the long-term planning, the ability to do the preventative maintenance as well as the immediate maintenance when there's breakages and things like that. It's super important. We want to minimize those things as much as possible. And when we do have rate increases, there's a lot of work done to try to make those no more than they need to be to achieve that goal, that long-term planning for the reliability and safety of the water and the wastewater systems. I'd like to see if there's any public comment on this item. Seeing none, Council, I'll go back to you for your second opportunity. I'd like to thank Mr. Cristiano for his attendance at these last couple of meetings and for the answers that he was able to provide for us on this topic, which will make part of the public information available as we discussed earlier when we talked about water rates. City Clerk, can we have a roll call vote on this item?
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schuster. Gabriel.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Cumbie.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk. We're going to go to the next item on the agenda, item number 20. Councilmember Harrington, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve original ordinance number 2038 on first reading, vacating approximately a 0.78 acre alleyway right-of-way within McHugh Addition lots 1 through 11, Block 1, generally located west of McHugh Street, south of Line Street and north of Baker Street, as recommended by the Planning Commission based on findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Second from Councilmember Schuster, that time on this item. We're going to recognize Mr. Taney from our planning department. You have the floor.
Mayor, Council, thank you. The request before you is a vacation of an alleyway. As noted in the motion, this is kind of located west of McHugh Street, nearby the KOA that is located in West Laramie, as well as a mobile home park, some hotels in that area. This request is being made by Nick Brisky. He's with the KOA, and they are looking to potentially expand the KOA further to the west on some vacant land. And this alleyway actually kind of bisects their existing park as well as this future expansion area. The alleyway in question actually runs much further north and south than just this area that would apply to, for instance, this KOA property. And is, like I said, is located between Lion Street and Baker Street. The alleyway is a paper alleyway. It means it's been platted, but it's not used for anything. It's never been maintained or developed by the city, and it's simply kind of a two-track generally there that maybe people have driven on, but it's not used for services. There's no utilities in it or anything like that. The proposal before you would vacate the alleyway. It would in turn take the alleyway as it is today and divide it up into 3 sections and if approved on third reading, be deeded over to 3 separate property owners that are kind of located between McHugh and this proposed alleyway. With the third reading is when you would see those deeds, so we will not see those right now. But what I would point out in this area is there is a water line that does cross perpendicular across this alleyway, and so to be clear, there's technically some utilities in it, but not running north-south through the alleyway. We will reserve an easement for that water line, which would allow us still to access that water line and continue to maintain it, which is needed. The last thing I would like to point out about this request is because the alleyway is an unused alleyway, it does meet the criteria specified in code for not to require compensation for the vacation of the alleyway. For alleyways or other rights of way that are used by the city council may determine and may decide for compensation for vacation of the alleyway. But staff does point out, and it's noted in the reports and ordinance, that it does meet that criteria as unused, essentially, paper alleyway. And so we would recommend that no compensation be required for vacation of this alleyway. With that, I would be happy to take any questions. As noted in the motion, this was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. I would also note we do public notice for these. All adjacent property owners adjacent to the alley, as well as extensions of the alley to the north and south, are notified. We did receive a comment from one of the property owners that's owner of one of the hotels to the north of this area, or to the west or east of the alleyway, sorry. And they did just had questions about that, but had no concerns about the request. And so with that, like I said, I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. T, just a quick question, maybe more just confirmation. So if I'm looking at the pictures correctly, that on the east side of the alley, on the south end, that southern parcel, that's undeveloped property right now. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Somerville, yes, you're correct. To the east of the alley on the south side, just kind of by Baker Street, that's undeveloped.
And so, Mr. T, I guess my question is, I was earlier looking through at all the utilities, and we're very sure that we won't need that alleyway, or that property won't need to use that alleyway to potentially run utilities to it in the future.
Mayor, council, no. There's no water and sewer served other directions through to this property and to the mobile home park and to the hotels that are all located in that area. We don't believe we need it.
And Mayor, if I can, just want another quick additional question. To the natural gas lines that are there, it does appear that there is a gas line running, maybe not in the alley, but just to the west of the alley. Does that statement for utilities apply to both the gas lines and power lines that might need to come in for development of that property as well?
Mayor and council, so there are existing utilities that are actually on property, so on private property, kind of to the west of that alleyway. They're nearby, but they're all in easements that are located on property, private property to the west.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Teeny about this topic? Councilmember Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. Derek, I was just curious. I see the application fee is $765 for this proposed vacation. Can you tell me what that's based on? Is that the number of hours that it takes to put together all of the paperwork and so on? It's, you know, not a small number indeed for somebody.
Yeah, Mayor and council, the fees that we charge by no means compensate for the amount of time that staff and applicants probably go through. These fees were set by resolution by the council. What we try to do is these fees are based upon more the time that we're putting in and kind of trying to relate all the different applications we have and how much time we actually have to spend going through review, coordinating with outside agencies. But it does not compensate for the time that we put in.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. Other questions for Mr. Teeny? And Mr. Teeny, I just want to mention that the council heard the waiving of costs that's been included in this process and some other aspects of that where normally there might be some administrative fees involved, given the nature of the paper alley, as you put it and explained it to us. There's been a waiving of some other costs that might be included, and we appreciate that information. I'd like to recognize Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I get lost in all these windows sometimes. I'm just curious, there's I was just looking at the map and there are a number of structures in that area. And does the loss of this alley impact the ability for the fire department to access these neighborhoods? Do you think that inhibits fire department access in any way?
Mayor and council member Cumby, so our fire prevention office did take a look at this vacation request and didn't have any concerns with it. The hotels that are located on McHugh Street would be accessed off of McHugh, which is a paved road. And then actually the fire department accesses both the mobile home park, which is kind of located on the northern end, but behind to the west of the alleyway, and the KOA, which is located kind of on the southern end west of the alleyway, via Lyon Street and Baker Street. There's also what's called A Street. It connects Lyon and Baker Street. It's a paved road, but it's just a driveway. It is not an actual city right-of-way, but it's a driveway that provides internal access to both the mobile home park on the north end and the KOA on the south end. And so that's how those areas are accessed, and the fire department had no issue with continuing that. They do not use that alleyway space to access any of the buildings in that area.
Thank you, Mr. Teeny.
Mr. Teeny. Let's see if there's public comment. Seeing none, council, back to you one more time. City Clerk, can we have a roll call vote on this item?
Humby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster, Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Takes us to the next item on the agenda. And before I recognize the Vice Mayor for introduction of this item, I know that we have a number of people in the audience that I anticipate wish to make public comment on this item. So I'd ask you to raise your hands and be given the cue for public comments so that you're ready when we go to the public on this item. So that we can just take you in order. I know we've had a couple of people that utilize the process of signing up ahead of time, and we'll recognize those people in the order that they requested. But also, if you're waiting to make public comment, I'd advise that you get your hands up using the Zoom program now so that we can take you in order. And I'm going to now give the floor to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve original ordinance number 2039, adding Laramie Municipal Code section 8.80 related to Laramie Rental Housing Code on introduction and first reading.
Second.
Second.
Second from Councilmember O'Doherty. I'd like to recognize the City Manager for background on the topic.
Hello, good evening, City Council. I had prepared a short overview to start the discussion of this item that would give us some background on sort of how we've arrived at this ordinance this evening. So let me load that up. I believe the City Clerk has given me authority to do that. Can you see the screen share, everybody? Yep, looks like you can. Okay, so with that in mind, let me start this presentation. Okay. My apologies. I'm not used to doing this. Usually Nancy is ably handling these things in the background. So Council, I just wanted to start with a little bit of background. As you know, we've been having an ongoing conversation over the last few years and quite intensely for the last 6 months about the housing shortage problem that we have in our community. Tonight we'll be focusing on rental units through the introduction of this ordinance on first reading. By way of just a bit more background, rental units in Laramie comprise probably over half of all of our housing. According to the U.S. Census, our owner occupancy rate between 2015 and 2019 was 45.3%. So by inference, you can see that we easily have more than half of the housing units in town being occupied by renters. As well, this has been a very lengthy conversation and has come up. City Clerk?
Thank you, City Manager. I was just wondering, right now on our screen, your presentation is a little bit small. We just wondered if you could maybe enlarge it for us.
Yes, let me work on that.
If you want, I can share it as well.
Yeah, Nancy, would you mind? You're so much more a pro at this than am I. Mayor and Council, is that a better screen share in terms of the sizing and whatnot? I see heads nodding. Great. All right. So Nancy, I'll just prompt you when we're ready to click through the presentation. Thank you, Council and City Clerk, for bringing that to my attention. So just continuing on, rental housing by inference then is easily half of the dwelling units that we have within the city of Laramie. So certainly if we're addressing our housing shortage and housing issues, rental units really need to be part of that conversation. In many ways, we've heard the community bring this to the attention of council through our citizen survey that surveys about city services and general issues within the community. We have conducted, as you know, numerous housing needs and affordability surveys over the past few years, and rental housing comes up pervasively in the responses we receive. We also, here at the city, as a fourth largest employer in town, see housing, and not just rental housing, but housing generally, come up in employee exit interviews. And I've heard from other employers, larger than us in the community, that it is cited as a reason that employees exit their employment, not being able to find housing they believe is really going to make them put down roots in our community. Business growth, as we know from talking with LCBA, recruitment and retention of employees is an issue when we talk with our largest employers, and then LCBA has told us that it's really beginning to be an impediment to be able to recruit new businesses, either newly into the community or to help the ones that are here expand. So I'm ready for the next slide. You all will see this slide is fairly familiar. Oh, see, Nancy doesn't have the clickable features. Nancy, can you back out of this slide? So I'll take back over for the next few slides. Sorry, Council. You've seen this slide before as far as meeting the demand for 2030. And what it shows is we have a tremendous need for housing, and a lot of it, I wanted to point out through the circles, is in rental housing. We know that rental housing is important to solving and addressing our rental problem in Laramie. Furthermore, the study that we conducted on how to meet the demand for 2030 repeatedly referenced rental housing and the need for it not only to be increased in terms of quantity. We were told that by 2020, a date we're clearly past, that 27 to 33% of our rental housing needed to be off-campus housing added to the inventory. We were noted in the 2015 study as being told that economic development business recruitment is being hampered by workforce housing, with workforce actually competing directly with our students for affordable housing. We were told that the lack of decent rental units or quality of rental housing is a common barrier. We were told not only does this affect workforce and students, but this is an important issue in the aging population as well, with too many seniors living in housing that needed to be upgraded, particularly to meet the needs of living 55 years and older. And we were told that this is very important for our young professional singles and couples, as well as elderly and workforce employees. And goal 6 within your housing study actually said you needed to establish a rental property occupancy permit process, noting that in the housing survey that we conducted of city residents, that housing and the need to rehabilitate it or improve the habitability of it was one of the top 4 housing issues identified as greatly needed for Laramie. So I'm going to back out of the screen share so that Nancy can do such a better job. Maybe I'll keep going if you can see it okay. We've told you in the last summer that what we know from an endless amount of study is there is no silver bullet to fixing housing in Laramie. It's a multi-pronged solution. So as you know what you're doing right now, you have items on your agenda to look at some code changes. And then tonight we're going to add another item for you to be talking about and looking at, which is this rental code that has been brought forward by the council sponsors. It has 3 elements to it: minimum habitability standards, a tenant-landlord complaint procedure, and thirdly, rental registration. As we researched this year some ways to address rental housing, I wanted to point out two new things that we've researched, and I want to mention to our newer council members and the public that, as you know, we've been looking at this issue for 2 and 3 years. Just a year and a half ago, we looked extensively and researched extensively a vast rental inspection program, which just ultimately didn't move through council for reasons that I won't go into. But this year, we've newly looked at the International Property Management Code, which is part of the International Code series. And basically what it does in a really simple nutshell is it establishes minimum specific maintenance standards for some sort of basic things that you would think are needed in order for any rental or any dwelling unit to be considered habitable and safe. Staff also researched a second new thing this year, and this was this model from Eugene, Oregon, brought to our attention by members of City Council. And it has really 4 elements in it. It has a strong educational compliance program, it had minimal fees, it had a complaint resolution process, and it had really what the Eugene, Oregon staff told me was a self-enforcing, that's their words, not mine, minimum habitability standard. I did reach out and speak to the program administrators and other folks in Eugene about how their ordinance was working. And so what I will tell you is that the ordinance that you have in front of you tonight is apparently modeled to some degree after what Eugene has done. On first reading, here's what's in front of you tonight, and I thought I'd just break it down simply, but these elements, these 4 elements will look familiar because they are really tracking out of that Eugene, Oregon model, and then a little bit of added material that staff included or recommended be included related to and stemming from the Property Management Code. So again, there's an educational compliance program, minimal fees, and the tenant has to first work with the landlord before they would file a complaint with the city and use our complaint resolution process. And then the 4th element are those minimum habitability standards. For the rental housing code on first reading tonight, I have worked up in the background, assuming that this may pass, a potential implementation schedule for each of the 3 elements. These would be the start and hopefully the end dates, and you'll note that the ordinance as drafted, I did ask for council to give some leeway to myself and other members of staff to implement the 3 elements in a piecemeal fashion with a final end date of January 1st, 2023 to have completed the full implementation of this ordinance. So you can see the schedule sketched out there, and of course subject to change based on what the council may do in adopting, or excuse me, in amending this resolution prior to adoption. And then the potential fee resolution that is mentioned in the ordinance. The ordinance says that staff would bring forward fee resolutions every 2 years for the council to adopt. What I am looking at based on the research we've done is a $15 to $20 yearly registration, and that's a typo there, and then also a small filing fee that would be set by resolution. Just to give some parameters to the discussion, we don't believe that a significantly large fee is necessary based on the research we did into the Eugene, Oregon program. In closing, the proposed first reading of the Rental Housing Code, there are 2 items I would like to seek some policy direction or concurrence from the council on. It was suggested by members of staff that a complaint filing fee, a small one, as mentioned in the previous slide, be considered by council. The reason for that is certainly to investigate the complaints and to go through the complaint resolution process will take some amount of staff time. And then also a complaint filing fee would potentially discourage the filing of frivolous complaints if that were ever going to be an issue. And then the second thing I'd like your policy direction or concurrence on as you consider this ordinance over the next series of weeks is the phased implementation that I mentioned in the previous slide, and allowing for staff to implement this in a 3-part strategy over the next year, basically through the calendar year of 2020. With that, that's all I had as far as background, and if you have questions, I'm certainly able to answer those as well. We have Assistant City Manager with us, and Clarice Hoff. Code Administration would likely be the final home for the 2 elements of this process not related to complaint processing, and so they will be important to the conversation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Council members, we'll do a round of questioning here, but I know that we'd like to get to public input also, and there may be a need to go to a second round of questions. We have a number of questions. We have a number of staff people on here that part of the ordinance before us will relate to in terms of implementation and administration of the program. So if you have questions for this first round, now's the time. We'll go to public comment. We'll come back for questions, and then we'll have a period for statements. I saw that Councilmember Harrington had raised his hand for recognition. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm not sure if this is certainly in order. And I appreciate you trying to keep us in our process. But to the city manager's question about the feedback she requires from council, would you like to hear that at this point, Mr. Mayor? Specifically on the filing fee for complaints and the staggered implementation. Does that feel in order to you, Mr. Mayor?
I think so. I'm looking to the Vice Mayor, and I think she agrees, and she's made the motion, so we'll go ahead and say, let's go.
Okay, great. I will keep it brief. I know we have a lot of members of the public. Janine, thank you for that presentation. I think it really clearly outlined what is and more importantly, what isn't included in this. To your questions, I would say if there is a fee associated with complaints, my preference would be that fee be as small as possible, given that the sort of financial picture of some renters. It may be a discouragement for frivolous complaints, but it could also serve as just a deterrent from filing. So I would like to keep that as small as possible. And then I think the staggered approach is the right idea for implementing this. One small piece that I wanted to mention that I think may require a bit more attention is specific to egress windows, simply because there is a bit of a shortage in people able to provide that service in our community. I would assume that will sort itself out if this passes, but we would hate to remove a ton of units because they were literally just unable to get those contractors in place. So I would just trust your judgment on sort of feathering that implementation, but I just wanted to note that for you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I wanted to say for this first round.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. I think those questions are in order and in line. No worries there. I'm going to go to Councilmember Schuster. Thank you, Councilmember Schuster, and I am gonna ask us, with no malice intended, that we try to focus this for questions. Right now, we will get a time to overall statements of support. I know I had Councilmember Gabriel and then Councilmember Somerville. You two are awfully close. I'm not sure who is seeking recognition next. Councilmember Somerville still got her hand up. I'm going to go to Councilmember Somerville, and then I'll go to Councilmember Gabriel, and I know I have some other people. Keep your hands up, folks, because I'm going to need to keep track. You can use the Zoom platform, too, if you don't want to, physically hold your hand up. Sorry, Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor, and I hope you'll allow this. I have one quick question for you, and then I have a question for the city manager. The first question for you, Mayor, is in terms of trying to keep some order and procedure tonight. I know a lot of times we get questions during public comments. I wonder if it would be appropriate for the city staff to just kind of keep track of those, and then we'll deal with all of the questions after public comment period, if that would be, I guess that's my suggestion. My question is, would that be okay?
Councilman Somerville, yeah, let's address that right now. I think that's in order, and I think we'll just ask the staff to do that. Normally we don't go for the question and answer exchange during comment, but I think there probably will be some legitimate questions, so we'll just ask the staff to sort of, to the best of their ability, keep track of those questions. We'll try to answer them at a later point. That makes sense to me. You have the floor, Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. And City Manager, this question is maybe a little bit more historical in nature, because the ordinance that we have in front of us is a complaint-based ordinance. It's very directed towards health and safety. Could you just kind of contrast that a little bit with some of the models we looked at years ago, which were scheduled inspections for everybody and more robust? I guess I don't know if that's the right terminology, but there was certainly a lot more burden out there on the landlords than what we're looking at now. Could you kind of compare and contrast that a little bit for me?
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the question, Councilor Somerville, and it may take a group mind to remember all of the things we've looked at. But from my recollection, most recently, I think in 2019 or 2020, we had looked at a robust is a good word for it, but a really broad and deep program of inspecting rentals, as had been suggested by people over the years, including in all the documents I just mentioned historically, our housing study, et cetera. What that program would have done is require all dwelling units within the city to be registered and be inspected on an annual or maybe every couple year basis. We didn't maybe get quite far enough to know how often that would be. And they would be inspected for compliance with things like the International Fire Code, the building codes that might be relevant to the date of construction, things of that nature. As we assess that from my side of the table, if council had adopted that policy, we would have needed certainly a whole large number of additional inspection personnel here at the city, recognizing that we have thousands and thousands of rentals in this community to the best of our understanding. So this is certainly a definitely dialed back approach and a lot less onerous on city staff, city resources, et cetera. Did I answer your question effectively? So that was our most recent conversations, but over the years, there have been a lot of ideas batted around.
Councilmember Somerville, unfortunately, you're muted.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, thank you for answering the question. And I'll just finish with just a little bit of our feedback on the questions that you answered. My personal preference would be no complaint filing fee, just because I'm concerned about the most vulnerable in our community and their financial resources, and I don't want that to be a barrier to them making sure that they have safe housing. And then on the staggered implementation, I very much appreciate the schedule that you laid out. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Schmeckel, thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe Councilmember Gabriel may have been going first.
That's cool. That's fine. Cool.
Forgive me if I stumble my way through this a little bit here. Is the intent of this ordinance to be something or to limit actions after a complaint is filed? Would a landlord be able to incentivize fixing these problems and reporting before a complaint process is put through? If I may give a hypothetical here, if I have a tenant that on their way of moving out breaks a light switch in a hallway, do I have to hire an electrician to come in and replace that $2 light switch, or can I go over, pop the breaker, grab my screwdriver, and replace that light switch right away and not have to worry about that?
Councilmember Schmeckel, Kara's thinking you want that question to go over to the city manager, which is great. And the city manager may want to bring in other people from other departments on that question. But city manager, it's yours.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Schmeckel, there are circumstances where a licensed contractor would be necessary. In my estimation, the example that you gave, of changing out a switch plate, for instance, over a light, is not one of those circumstances. And the mayor rightly noted that we do have Clarice Hoff with us, as well as the assistant city manager who oversees the code administration section. So I'd ask them, and if you don't mind, Mayor, if they would like to weigh in at all on that question.
City manager, I appreciate that. I think that's appropriate, and I'll just look to see whoever gets a hand up first. And again, we want to thank Councilmember Gabriel for his patience and his willingness to yield to some of this discussion, since he did have a hand up, and we do appreciate it. I think if we could, this might be a good opportunity to address what seems to be an emerging concern in general about this ordinance, which is that there might be a lot of small repairs, and I think there's concern that that would require contractors, licensed contractors, and I think this kind of gets to the heart of the question from Councilmember Schmeckel, and if we could sort of get a general feel for how that would work with this ordinance, specifically an idea as to what types of repairs would not require the use of the licensed contractors versus those that would, to the extent that we can do that. Assistant City Manager, I think you're probably on track with what we're getting at here, so I'd like to turn it over to you to ask you to try to get to some of those questions, because I think they represent a broad amount of concern that we've heard so far about this. So I'll give you the floor.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, this is very similar to the discussion we had when we were talking about licensing general contractors, and although it's very difficult to get into a situational if this happens or that happens. The ICC that we use for our codes is pretty specific as to the items that require a permit or don't require a permit. However, in the rental code, we asked to have the licensed contractor listed under plumbing, electrical, and basically mechanical work, because there's just quite a few items in there that I don't believe that the average homeowner is qualified to do and make sure it's done correctly for the safety of somebody that's actually buying that space from them. With that being said, you know, when I remember, and Clarice is on the line, she can clarify, you know, typically if we're in a like for like replacement, like if you're replacing a faucet or you're changing the wax ring on a toilet or potentially changing out a light switch, I don't believe that those are typically hard permitted items. It's when you get into a problem where you've got an electrical issue that takes more than that, where you're pulling wire and doing things that are well beyond just average maintenance. And I wish I could go in deeper than that, but it's just very difficult to do that at this point. And I'll defer to Clarice if you have any clarification on that, Clarice.
Clarice, you have the floor if you'd like to add to that. I think again, just to try to help give some shape to this, we're talking about those sort of those like for like type of repairs versus when the licensed contractor provisions would be what we're concerned about. Is that more or less correct, Councilmember Schmeckel? As you posed the original question?
Yes, right. Thank you, Mayor. That's correct.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Clarice, if you'd like to, you have the floor to weigh in on this. If you have anything different you'd want to add.
So we're under the International Residential Code. And so under section R105 permits, under what is required for a permit, it spells it out. But also under this section, it also has a list of what would be exempted from. So in looking at the hypotheticals, or when someone calls in to see if they need a permit for a certain situation, we see if it falls underneath the exception or if they're going to need a permit. Rental property, it wouldn't be the owner's primary residence, so at that point, licensed contractors would need to be hired in order to pull a permit for work that would fall under the permitted work. If it would fall under the exceptions, then they would not need to pull a permit and would not need to be licensed. But I think we do need to kind of keep in mind that so many of the rentals have had individuals that are not necessarily qualified doing the work, that it's easier for the landlord or the property manager or the handyman to go ahead and do the work. And that is, I think, part of the reason as to why some of our rental situations are in the condition that they are. So even though a landlord wants to be able to do their work, some of the problems that we're seeing now is a result of that. But I do want to clarify that there is exceptions that would not need a permit under plumbing, mechanical, electrical, and even in gas and building. So if the exceptions would fall into that, then they wouldn't need a permit. But the overall requirement for a permit is to construct, enlarge, alter, repair, move, demolish, or change the occupancy of a building or structure, or to erect, remove, or replace, convert. So it's a very broad area that is permitted, and alter and repair is in there, but then there are exceptions to that rules that we take on a case-by-case basis.
I have a follow-up to that, and is that a list of exceptions that's consolidated in a document?
The exceptions are part of section R105, which is in the International Building or Residential Building Code.
I'm going to suggest that we have that
portion of that is. The exempt part of that is R105.2, work exempt from permit.
I'm going to suggest that we get that pulled up for the future part of this discussion, so that we have that available, because I think people will probably want to take a look at that. Council, I'm going to go to Councilmember Schmeckel. Do you have any follow-up before I go to Councilmember Gabriel? All right, thank you. Councilmember Gabriel, again, thank you for your patience in yielding to those other questions. You have the floor.
You bet. Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate it. Several years ago, when this was brought before the council, many of the property owners cited state statutes and how property was covered with residential. And I looked up Article 12, residential rental property, state statute, duties of owners and renters. And certainly, Janine, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I was just curious if you could compare what statute at the state level says and what this particular proposed ordinance, how you would compare the two. And maybe you don't need to do that now, because that might take a little more education and background work, but that would be one of my questions.
Thank you. Mayor, through you, Councilor Gabriel, the ordinance, and I'm going to ultimately lob this to the city attorney, but the ordinance as drafted acknowledges that section of state statute and states the intention of the ordinance to be complementary to that. And I know Bob's taken a look at it and done more research. So whatever the will of the council, if you'd like us to address that on second reading, I'm sure that that can be accomplished, or tonight.
City Attorney, would you have a preference for addressing that now or at the second reading?
Well, I think
Maybe
if,
called up.
Mayor, I think if the question is a detailed, sort of section by section statutory comparison, no, I can't do that tonight, or I don't think it's wise to try to do tonight. But this ordinance, this proposed ordinance, really doesn't affect the operation of the state statute. The state statute is ultimately directed at the ultimate, and I'm speaking very generally, but it's ultimately directed at the contractual relationship between landlord and tenant, and when the landlord can get rid of the tenant and when the tenant can be done with the landlord. That's not what this statute is about. Much like our building codes, it establishes some basic more detailed habitability standards, but the enforcement here is, the enforcement in this statute, should it ever occur, has nothing to do with terminating the contractual relationship between landlord and tenant. We can't do that. We can't get involved in that. That's what the state statute does, and they do it through the courts of the state. That's a very general answer, Councilor Gabriel. But if you want more, need more, we can talk, and I can certainly come forward at second reading.
That would be great. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Doherty.
I just want to get this out here because Councilor Gabriel raised it. The only way the state statute is enforced is through small claims court. So so the students that are 18 years old, who, by the way, may not be able to drive or fly to Laramie to check an apartment before they can rent it, the only way they can enforce that is small claims court. And I don't know many people that are 18 that have that wherewithal. And so that's why I don't think that's adequate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. The city attorney, is that more or less accurate? Because I will share. And Councilmembers, I see your hands up, but I do want to get this addressed because we keep saying second reading. Well, we don't know if we're going to get to second reading, so some of these questions probably have to be addressed now. Is it speaking to your earlier point, city attorney, about the statutory enforcement of this is directed towards the contracts and the civil end of it, and doesn't provide for any mechanisms for enforcement of habitability standards other than to the contractual law, the leases, which I think the understanding is small claims court is an avenue for that. I don't know what other legal avenues exist for people that might be in a dispute like this. Can you speak to that?
Well, yeah, and again, very generally, that of course what's just been expressed is true. I mean, if you're in a fight with your tenant about their non-payment of rent or one thing or another that the tenant is doing, or you're in a fight with your landlord about the heat, or the hot water, you have to proceed through, the only remedy is to proceed through circuit court. So that's correct, right? You'll have to be in court and follow the procedures under the statute. The ultimate goal of the procedures in court is essentially a contractual goal. Sorting out and defining the contractual rights of the party, which end up either in an eviction or, it gets extremely complicated. Third, and I think that this is where an ordinance like this, if you look upon it with favor, comes into play. Nothing in that statutory scheme in circuit court is directed at getting anything resolved. Like fix the heat, or your complaint is ridiculous, and so we the city are not going to get into your problem. That's not what that statutory court system is for. And that's it. And this ordinance is directed at something else, which is let's get the problem fixed. Now, that said, nothing in this ordinance prevents at all the landlord or tenant from pursuing remedies at court. The ordinance, and again I speak generally, is directed at fixing and continuing the relationship and the living situation. But nobody has to use, the tenant doesn't have to use this ordinance. Nothing that happens in the enforcement of this ordinance really has any bearing on the statutory rights of either party, which still exist. Does that help?
Thank you. Thank you. And a word towards your good caution in speaking generally. I think when we're talking about passing this at the ordinance level during this legislative process, we really have no choice except to try to speak generally because specific circumstances will be specific. But I do appreciate that. I think I'll go back to Councilmember Gabriel or Councilmember O'Doherty to see if there's any follow-up after that explanation. And I'm not seeing any. And I appreciate that from the city attorney. Council members, I know that there was the vice mayor and then I believe Councilmember Cumby, and I think that was our order. So I'm going to go to the vice mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would just like to address the city manager's request. I most appreciate the phased-in approach. I think that's wise. And in terms of a complaint fee, I think it should be probably as reasonable, as low as possible, and perhaps it too becomes part of the phased-in process, because initially we may see only a couple complaints or potentially frivolous complaints. And I think we just need to kind of track and gather up some data and then make a decision based on that. Because as it stands right now, we have no idea, right? So maybe we just learn as we go and then make adjustments as we go. So thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that my question was addressed by the city attorney. I would just like to add that it's been documented the difficulty that individuals are having when they wish to take a matter to court in having the summons to court delivered to the landlord. And it seems to be rather, a difficult process. Each time they have to file to try to go to court is $50. And if the summons cannot be delivered, then it just goes on forever. And so I just think we have some problems with compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Council members, other questions right now? I think we're probably getting to that point where we're going to move over for public feedback and public input on this. Seems like everybody's ready for that. All right, just a couple of friendly requests from the council. The 3-minute time limit is in effect, as it always is for public comment. And of course, the council has no illusions. We cannot make you do anything, but our general request is if there's a theme to comments, if you have a new point that you'd like to add, either for or against this, please do so as we go throughout the course of the comments. But we would respectfully request, and it can only be a request, that we try to avoid a lot of repetition of the main points. Of course, you have your full rights to make whatever types of comments that you'd like. Just a request from the council. We're going to go in order. We'll begin with the members of the public who requested ahead of time to the city clerk's office recognition for public comment. The first name, city clerk can correct me if I don't have this correct, is Austin Lipson. And you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me okay? Awesome. So yeah, my name is Austin Lipson. I'm an elementary teacher in Laramie. I am a landlord, and I was also a renter in Laramie for several years. As a landlord, I can say that some of the proposed rental housing code does make me a little nervous in that I hope it gets enforced fairly. Councilman Harrington, for example, mentioned the stuff with the egress windows. You know, I could see some things getting iffy there. However, as a former renter in Laramie who lived in one place that snow would blow into through cracks in the walls and another place that had plants growing up through the floors during the summer, I firmly support passing the rental code and can say with confidence that this town needs it. Let's look at the potential negative consequences of passing or not passing the rental housing code. If we pass it, us landlords will have to pay to register our properties, and we may have to make some payments to get some updating accomplished on these properties. It could be, and I hope this does not happen, that the rental code will be enforced too strongly or unfairly, and landlords may have to put forth some cash as a result. However, all of the above mentioned expenses are ones that we as landlords can afford if we're just being realistic about our economic position in this landlord-tenant relationship. On the other hand, what happens if the code doesn't pass? Well, we continue being stuck in the situation that we have now, in which more than a few renters in this town are paying to live in unreasonable conditions. Renters often don't have the money to improve their situations or are unable to respond to negative living conditions that will persist if the rental code does not pass. This rental housing code doesn't call for marble countertops or recessed lighting. It doesn't even require that rental units be, quote, nice. It just requires that they be safe. If there are landlords out there worried that they'll lose substantial sums of money as a result of this housing code, I would ask, are their rental units so lacking in safety that bringing them up to par will really cost them that much money? If so, they may themselves have the very rental units that this code is meant to address. And just a quick note, somebody made a good point earlier, which is this code could only affect good landlords who register. It's not going to affect the bad landlords who want to keep their property secret. However, since this is a complaint-based system, if a tenant files a complaint against somebody to the city that their landlord isn't behaving fairly, that's kind of going to be a clue to the city that that person is a landlord. You're not going to get a complaint filed against you and your property unless you have someone living in your property. So I feel like that problem will kind of work itself out. But anyway, in sum, I ask the council, please think of the renters and pass the rental housing code. It will protect a population of people that needs and deserves protecting. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience in waiting for an opportunity to speak. City Clerk, the next name I had on the list provided earlier was Taylor Norton. Would like to recognize Mr. Norton. You have the floor.
Can you hear me okay? Awesome. So my name's Taylor Norton. I've been a resident of Laramie for 10 years. I've been a renter that entire time with varying qualities of properties and landlords. I just want to say I generally approve of the proposed ordinance's intent, and I find that such regulations are desperately needed within the city of Laramie. I wholeheartedly encourage the council to adopt the proposed measures so as to protect the city's renters from unscrupulous property owners who seek to take advantage of the sheer quantity of renters who inhabit Laramie. An earlier statistic pointed out that approximately 55% of residential properties are rented rather than lived in by the owners. That also likely doesn't take into account the number of people who live with roommates. So the actual number of renters is probably far greater than 55%. The proposed regulations are perfectly reasonable and are easily met. Not only that, there is a recourse provided that allows aggrieved tenants to seek relief should the regulations be violated. I do, however, find two areas wherein the proposal could be improved. First, I agree with Councillor Somerville's opinion that there should be no filing fee for submitting a complaint. A fee would ultimately serve as a deterrent of legitimate complaints from people who cannot afford to pay such a fee, as is the case for many of the city's renters. Second, I would like to see a provision which requires lease agreements to spell out the habitability standards and the process by which a tenant may seek municipal assistance in the enforcement of these regulations. It is not unreasonable to assume many renters will be unaware of the intricacies of municipal code, especially those who will move to the city after its adoption. Including this information within rental agreements in a clear and easily noticed fashion would go a long way toward protecting tenants' rights under these codes. All in all, this ordinance is long overdue, and I'm thankful to the City Council that the City Council is addressing the needs of the majority of its citizens. To Councillor Schuster's concerns, I would argue that doing nothing would solve no problems, and enacting this proposed ordinance would do more good than harm. Moreover, placing the responsibility of property inspection on potential renters is dismissive and distracts from the issues that arise from people taking advantage of a system that cannot hold them accountable. There is no reason to believe the terrible landlords he described will be able to successfully avoid what is being proposed here, and I see no reason to vote against it in Councillor Schuster's statements. With that, I will yield the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to give a quick reminder. I know people have different points of view about civility standards and civility politics, but we do ask that people avoid using names and speak to policy, although I don't think any comment there was ill-intended. We do ask that we avoid using personalities and names. City Clerk, the next name, except in recognition of speakers, pardon me, the next name on the list that I had from earlier was Janelle Hansen. We'd like to have Janelle Hansen in the meeting, and you have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm a landlord, and I have a property where I have tenants, students and just this last year, I had 5 girls that moved into my house, and they had gone through. They had come from a place. They were quite delighted to find my house because their last landlord had not only was the heating a problem, but there was problems with electrical, and they filed complaints. And to the city, they went down to file the complaints, and he was, served a summons or whatever, but it had once they're served, there's a limit, I guess, on how long, and the person avoided the coming in, and then it was dropped, and so they had to file again and again, right. and losing between the deposits, all of their rent. I think it was double rented at the time. And anyway, they were just beside themselves by the time they got to my place, and they had quit filing. And so anyway, what struck me was that this person, it seems like there's legal things that to go through the small claims court, there are these legal pathways to have this happen, but it just seemed like nothing was, there was no consequences for this person. And so I guess what I question, now I have more new tenants in my house, and they were delighted because they came from a place that probably the space, even though they had a shared kitchen and were in what looks like a shared, pretty much a similar situation, the space was probably about 4 times the space for about the same amount of rental. So in this town, these, what looks like what I would say quite a good deal is quite cramped quarters for these people, and yet the rates are still the same. Given the property that I have the maintenance on, the yard and everything, trying to keep a decent yard with all the water rates, everything going up. I think what I'm wondering is if it seems to me that there are these laws in place, but they're just not being enforced. And basically, I've had extremely good luck with tenants. They seem to be very good. They're young people, but they've treated me well. I try to treat them well. And I think the majority of people in this town that are renting are doing that. I really do. I think there are a few that need to be ferreted out and brought to some consequences. And I would certainly, I'm not sure this whole thing with bringing in, I definitely think it should be less money to file a complaint, and but I think there should be some consequences at the end of it. But I'm not sure it should go on to the people who are putting trying to do a decent business. And
Ms. Hanson, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to ask you to conclude your comments. There may be an opportunity to add later, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude. It's okay. Simply that there are other speakers, and we're trying to keep it to that 3 minutes.
Sure.
Are you okay? Did you have? Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. And again, I really apologize. We do like to try to adhere to those times. Thank you, and thank you for your patience. At this time, we'd like to recognize Brett Glass and provide Mr. Glass the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'll try to keep my remarks around 3 minutes, but please be lenient with me if I go over a little because there's a lot to say. When I saw this item appear on the agenda last Friday, I was appalled because there was no warning that this was coming. There was no coverage in the newspaper. There were no notices sent out by the city. No opportunity whatsoever for public input to what it was going to say prior to its appearance on the agenda. And the agendas, of course, are buried deep in the city's website, several clicks and menus down. So anyway, I opened the document and read it at last Friday, and it was even worse than I feared. In a nutshell, this ordinance is illegal according to state law. It's harmful. It will do nothing to improve the condition of rental housing in Laramie, and it will make all rental housing except that which is owned by the university, which will be conveniently exempt, more scarce, harder to maintain, and more expensive. You should vote this down on first reading and go no farther. Let me tell you why. First, it isn't original. Even before the city manager mentioned it, I discovered within a few minutes with a text search that the text really is nearly identical to that of the ordinance in Eugene, Oregon. Now, I've been there. That area has very different state laws, very different climate, and a very different economy. It's a very rich community, close to the ocean, which means that mold is much more common there. And as you can see from a quick look at Craigslist, market rents in in Eugene are about double those in Laramie. That's right, double. While this can be attributed in part to other factors, much of the difference is clearly due to regulation, which limits supply and raises the costs. And that's natural when you think about it. You regulate things you want to discourage, not things you want to encourage or things you want to be easy to find or inexpensive. Many members of council have asserted they want more and more affordable housing in Laramie, yet here the city is proposing to harshly regulate and tax the housing occupied by more than half of Laramie's residents, including the most economically disadvantaged. One of the things this ordinance does is require a registration of every single rental unit with fees per unit and criminal penalties for failing to do that. Here in Wyoming, we don't require registration of guns, but here we're requiring grandma to register her backyard cottage or be hauled into court. Irresponsible landlords won't do it, and they'll force the cost upon the law-abiding ones. What's more, because the cost is per unit, more affordable small units will be taxed a higher percentage of their rent than larger ones, and this will hit the most cash-strapped tenants the hardest. Another provision of this ordinance requires rental owners to use licensed contractors for virtually all repairs. As you may recall, when you considered the contractor licensing ordinance not long ago, city staff swore up and down that owners of rentals would not be forced to hire expensive licensed contractors to work on their own property. We could do the work ourselves or have a handyman do it. But here it is, they weren't being truthful with us. At the behest of the contractor lobby, they've added language which wasn't in the Eugene ordinance to make it explicitly illegal to fix your own property. This would delay repairs, increase their cost, and very likely cause damage and or serious hazards. I'll explain why. Just this week, one of our tenants, or maybe one of their guests, flushed feminine hygiene products down the toilet. We warned them not to do it, but some of them do it anyway, and it clogged the sewer line. We called our regular plumbing contractor, and they said their big sewer machine was broken. So we called others, and no one said they could come in less than 2 days. Now, this isn't acceptable with a floor drain backing up in the basement threatening the flood, so I got out my smaller sewer machine, attached the fiercest cutting blade I had, and I gauged the athletic event of forcing the cable down the line. I spent more time and was more thorough than a professional would have been, and I did that dirty job because I'm a responsible landlord. I don't say live with it until someone comes. I know what I'm doing and I get things fixed. But this ordinance will prohibit me from doing so. The problem would be even worse in units managed by a rental management company or an apartment complex with a handyman. They'd no longer be allowed to fix many problems for tenants. Laws mean what they say, not what the staff ham waves away, and this ordinance explicitly provides no exceptions in the text. None. It covers all repairs, and it doesn't say anything about permits or no permits. So the bottom line is this. Do you want us to be good landlords? And please let us be good landlords. Don't prevent us from doing our work. Don't drive small property owners out of the market. You just voted to raise our water and sewer rates tonight. Don't force us to raise our rents further to cover the cost of a new tax on rentals. And don't cause us to consider selling the less responsible landlords because bureaucracy is just too much. I see that I'm running out of time. The only other thing I want to say is please respect state law and the federal, and also the Constitution of the state and the federal government, which this ordinance would violate. And it's already these ordinances have already been ruled to do so in other places. There are other things I want to comment on, but since you're holding up a sign that says time, I'll defer those to the next comment period. All I can say is please don't go ahead with this. It's very inconsiderate and will do great harm, no good. Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate your effort to hold things into the time. Next, we'd like to recognize Murphy Fennell and provide the floor, and thank you for your patience. You have the floor.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. My name is Murphy Fennell. I'm currently a landlord in the city of Laramie. I do want to apologize in advance for anything I say that may be repetitive against the request of council. However, I do think it's important for me to speak up in favor of this ordinance because last time it was brought up, not enough landlords did. In fact, I don't think any landlords did. I'm happy to hear that a few already have tonight. Although I am currently a landlord, I spent most of my 20s as a renter in the city of Laramie. I've been mistreated and disrespected by landlords in this town without recourse in the past. Safe housing should be considered a right, not a privilege. I attended the meeting last time this issue was brought before council, and I regret not speaking at that time. That meeting was overrun with self-proclaimed good landlords who opposed the proposal, citing reasons such as, I shouldn't be punished for the actions of the bad landlords in this town, and this will be bad for renters because the cost will be transferred to them in the form of higher rent. But if you are as good of a landlord as you say you are, presumably that means you respond in a timely manner when your tenants are experiencing safety issues in their homes, and therefore will not be subject to any complaints or fines. Regarding the issue of renters renting places sight unseen. As was mentioned earlier, many people who are moving to this town are unable to come visit a property before they sign a lease. And the inability to do that does not render someone ineligible for safe housing. Regarding the fees for landlords, it has already been made very clear that those fees will be nominal. I guess if you want to transfer the $15 to $20 a year to your tenants, then their rent will be $1 to $2 higher per month. So I don't really see the issue there. Regarding the issue with people being able to address these problems in court, even if the summons can be even if the summons can be delivered, the court process can take months. The idea here is that the resolution takes place quickly. I believe it says 10 days. So people should not be forced to live in unsafe housing conditions for months because their only method for addressing these issues is by taking it to court. I do agree that all of this should be required to be included in leases so that tenants are aware of their rights and how they can file these complaints. I am, as has been mentioned, I am very concerned about the issue of egress windows, not because I'm not concerned for the safety of my tenants, for the safety of other people in this town, but because I do believe there are a lot of basement apartments in this town. And if those cannot be rented out, we will actually see an increase in the issue of inability to find housing. So I do think that needs to be addressed. I know that was mentioned. I just wanted to add that I agree. And finally, I do agree that renters should not be subject to a filing fee. If the issue is that people can't afford safe housing in this town, I can't imagine they can afford the filing fee. I mean, maybe they can. I don't know what it's going to be. One possible solution to that could be you only require the renter to pay the filing fee if it turns out to be an invalid complaint. Otherwise, the landlord should have to pay the fee. I'm privileged to be a landlord, and I believe I'm a good landlord, but I can't accommodate the needs of every single renter in this town. So my being a good landlord is frankly irrelevant. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate your efforts to try to adhere to the time rules. And again, the request from the council about repetition isn't going to be interpreted extremely strictly. It's just our request to try to keep the public comment going. Certainly, if you have things you want to say in agreement with other people, you have the right and ability to do that, and we won't be overly harsh in our determination about what's repetitive, or at least I'll try not to be. Next, we'd like to recognize Allison Brown. And council members, I'm going to mention the fact that Ms. Brown is the ASUW Student Government Director for External Affairs, and we'd like to recognize.
Yeah, can everyone hear me, Mr. Mayor? Sorry. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So just kind of putting on that hat, I'm excited to announce some of you knew that ASUW, or the Associated Students University of Wyoming, our student government here at the University of Wyoming, has really been interested in this issue. And tonight we had a resolution in support of the ordinance up for vote, and I'm happy to say that it unanimously passed. So we are very excited to be sharing that with council tonight, obviously showing that this ordinance has the support of the entire student body, which is very exciting. Just recapping some of the issues that we brought up in our legislation, which I will be sure to distribute to all of you, passed in the final form. ASUW at the University of Wyoming conducted a survey earlier this year, and we found that of 577 students, 23%, or 133 of them, have had issues with a current or past landlord. The most common things among them would be the four of the first being non-responsive or lack of communication with their landlord or property management company. Secondly, a misrepresentation of the unit or lease in advertising. Thirdly, a landlord or property management company not upholding their lease. And then fourthly, unsafe living conditions. So this is definitely an issue that is relevant to students in the University of Wyoming, and obviously if students in the University of Wyoming being such a large portion of individuals who are renting from landlords and property management companies, this is something we're very passionate about. And just for the sake of time again, I will distribute that resolution that we passed again unanimously tonight to everyone, and we look forward to continuing to work with you all and making sure this ordinance can be passed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that, and it's valuable for the council to hear that information from the student government. If that seems like a breach of protocol from other public comments, I do want to emphasize to members of the public in attendance here, the student government sends their representative, Ms. Brown, to every meeting, and they have certainly been very engaged with this topic for more than just the duration of this item being on the city council's agenda. They have repeatedly engaged with the city on this topic over a number of years. Go next to screen name Sam N, and just please provide your name for the public record, and you have the floor.
Hi there, can you guys hear me? Great, yeah, my full name's Sam Newman. I've been a renter in Laramie for a number of years, and I'll probably continue to rent in Laramie for many years to come. I wanted to be pretty brief. Basically, I just wanted to say this resolution would be really beneficial to renters, in my opinion, not to go over other people's comments. I think it would also be beneficial to landlords in this community, especially ones who are already doing good work. I think it will encourage more people to feel safe renting and continue to do so for years to come. If they have a bad experience with renting in Laramie, that might just encourage them to leave our community. So I think if we foster a more safe rental atmosphere, I think that'll encourage growth in Laramie. And I also wanted to address the point that was made that regulation in this capacity might discourage growth. I think I would argue the opposite in that. I think, when we have slumlords in our community that provide unsafe housing for people here, it drives people out of our community. For me, I think when we're speaking of affordable housing and the fact that Laramie needs a lot of growth, we need more rental units in our community. I think I, for one, would be more supportive of the development of properties if I know that there's a strong regulatory framework. I wouldn't feel comfortable if we're encouraging as a city government to build a bunch of haphazard living conditions for people. But if I know that future tenants have a place to file complaints, then to me that makes the argument for affordable housing development greater. And finally, I just wanted to address one anecdote that someone had provided about clearing a stoppage in one of their properties. Reading here from the 2018 International Residential Code, which is going to be the framework for exemptions on this ordinance. From R105.2, the exemptions in the plumbing section, number 2 says, lays out the exemption, quote, the clearing of stoppages or the repairing of leaks in pipes, valves, or fixtures, and the removal and installation of water closets, provided such repairs do not involve or require the replacement or rearrangement of valves, pipes, or fixtures. So that kind of indicates that that particular anecdote would not require a permit to be solved. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, point of order.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm seeing this correctly or not, but it does say on our screen that the meeting has ended from Chambers.
Councilor Harrington, I believe the city council procedure in effect at this time is that as this item is on the agenda and live, the meeting goes on through 10 o'clock to the conclusion of this item, or 10 o'clock, whichever comes first. So I believe the meeting is still going. Appreciate the point of order and point of information. But I believe we're still in session until 10 p.m.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, what I was getting at, it has resolved itself, but the council Zoom screen had changed. So I was just making sure we were still broadcasting the end of the meeting.
Yes,
I can check it with
Councilmember
the broadcast company.
Yep. I think that just happens automatically because of that 9:30 time period. But again, appreciate the attention, Councilmember Harrington. Please excuse us, members of the public, for that point of order, point of information. We're going to go on to public comment. Next up, in order of speakers, we have Derek Calling. Derek Calling into the meeting. Mr. Calling, you have the floor.
Thank you. Can you all hear me all right? Appreciate it. I'd like to start off by saying, and this is not an attempt to boast myself up, but I am a licensed real estate broker and property manager. in short, I'm opposed to this, and I can speak to a couple of reasons why. Back in 2019, when this was first proposed, the proposal was really for an ad hoc committee to look into this. Fast forward 2 years, almost 3 years, and we are where we are today. And all of a sudden, this is kind of sprung on us with no attempt for for the real estate professionals to weigh in on it or to have any input into this whatsoever. That's kind of a concern to me. We are the people in the trenches. We are the people doing the work. We are the people who know the complaints that come in. We know the condition of these properties, and we understand what it takes to maintain these places and deal with tenants. You on the city council are very smart people, and but I don't believe that any of you are real estate professionals. One of the things that concerns me, we have there's some information regarding a study that was done on the lack of affordable housing, which I would agree with, and the lack of housing in general in Laramie, I would agree with. What we don't have any information on, though, is how your proposal would affect the Laramie real estate market, how it's going to affect housing prices, how it's going to affect rental prices, how it's going to affect supply and demand. We have no studies on that. We have no information. All we have is an anecdotal story out of Eugene, Oregon, based on what the city staff in that community says, which doesn't have a whole lot of bearing on what happens in Laramie. I will tell you from firsthand experience, we get a lot of people coming to Laramie because it's not Oregon, because it's not California, because it's not Colorado. I personally work with investors from different states, and when they see things like this come across the table, they push the pause button. It happened back in 2019. Investors bailed out of our community, and they didn't come back. There's renewed interest in our community, and I will tell you that this proposal has already shifted that. There's not as much interest in our community because people that are interested in coming to this community in the first place are not interested in regulations. They want to escape these places that have regulations, and they want to come to a place where they can have their freedom. They can live the American lifestyle that they want to. In my opinion, and most other real estate professionals' opinions, this will cause an increase in rent and not a decrease in rent to provide more affordable housing. I would urge you to maybe hit the pause button on this. I know that you have enough votes that you could pass this, and you probably will. I have no delusions about that. My suggestion would be that hit the pause button, talk to some real estate professionals, maybe the Laramie Board of Realtors, maybe the professionals in property management, not necessarily the individual landlords, but I think that they have a good voice in this too. But let's get some good local perspectives on what this thing can do. And I urge you to at least not pass it right now. Thank you.
Next public comment in the queue is Linda Devine for recognition. Linda Devine. Ms. Devine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thanks to you and the council for bringing forth this proposed ordinance. I am in favor of it. Couple of comments that I have, and I am speaking from a local who has a good perspective on this. So I'd like to let council know that ordinances like these are for the health and safety of tenants. And so when we start worrying about investors aren't going to come into our community, or making sure that the real estate developers and everybody else is okay with this ordinance, that's concerning. Because the bottom line is, as a city, do we want to make sure that the tenants have not just adequate housing, but safety and health? For one, I do appreciate the number of landlords that have spoken in favor of this ordinance tonight, and I really appreciate that. A couple of things that I just wanted to point out and request. One, that the fees be waived. I know several have brought that up, and I do think it's really important. I actually am probably one of the few that thinks there should be some kind of an inspection, because we're talking about health and safety. We have restaurants, we have food trucks. They have to be inspected. They have to pay for licensing. And I think there should be some kind of inspection to make sure that the landlords are providing a safe environment. I also would point out, and I don't know if the city council can do something about this bait and switch that we see all the time. Landlords are posting things on the internet, and I know one of the council members, not to mention names, had said people can drive all the way to Laramie and check it out. Folks can't do that. So a lot of real estate companies, landlords, they post these amazing pictures and people sign on for it, and then they get here and it's nothing like what had been posted. So if there's some way that we can get that into an ordinance, I think that would be great. The other thing I had, and it was more of a question, perhaps city manager would follow up or something later on, was the timeline for the complaint to be resolved. And I don't know that I was reading clearly in there, because I know there's timelines for, the tenant has to provide notice to the landlord and different things like that. And so I'm just wondering if there's going to be a time frame put in place for how long the complaint would take to get resolved, because I think that when we're dealing with health and safety issues, the longer that it's drug out, the more devastating it could be. So again, that's all I have to say. I just want to thank you again for bringing this forward, and I would urge you to pass this. Thank you.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I apologize, council members. Next, I have a screen name Ann. I'd like to allow into the meeting, and we'll provide you with the floor. And we just please request that you share your name for the public record. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you. This is Ann Van Wig, and we are a landlord, and I am happy to support this movement with some reservations on the speed and how you are implementing, because I do think there's enough ambiguity in it that doesn't need, it shouldn't go on to another reading until those things are resolved. So as a landlord, we have great renters, have for a number of years. They're amazing. We use a management company because we're not in the state right now, and they have been responsive. And so I'm really concerned about the whole repair thing. We do use handyman, and I have to tell you, just because they're contracted doesn't mean you're not going to have problems and that you don't have things repaired and you can't get a hold of them. And so the repair and the contracting and who you're using is really problematic. And especially in this time where it's hard to get somebody to paint something. If it's an emergency, somebody will usually come out, but if it's kind of a long-term fix, that could be an issue. So I really have a problem with that language of that. I was also thinking about just some things in general. If this is really about the health and safety, if that's really the concern, nobody should be in a basement without egress windows. And so now you have warring thoughts on, well, we need them so that they can be in a safe rental, and it's safe except they don't have a egress. Doesn't work. Like, we have a basement, we've rented out, every room has an egress. And I get it, that you can't enforce it if you can't get the work in it, but then you shouldn't be having it. Like, if the real goal is to have health and wellness, they shouldn't be in there. So that's why I think you need to really pause on this right now while you are still considering how to implement. Then I started thinking about the repairs and pulling a permit. what does that mean? And then what, there was some ambiguity about that, about, we can take it into consideration. It is either you do or you don't. And you can't have, sometimes you have to pull a permit and sometimes you don't. It has to be very clear. And again, that's probably where it needs to be a pause. I think it needs more work because I'm honestly not opposed. Good rentals mean good, people who are happy with the city, happy with what's going on. They want to stay. I don't disagree with that. I just think it needs some more work before you move forward and vote yes. So, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, you're muted again.
Of course I am. I'm keeping track of too many tabs. Next screen name that we'd like to welcome into the meeting is screen name Ilyana. And of course, as we've asked everyone else, just please provide your full name for the record, and you have the floor.
Can you hear me? Sweet. My name is Ilyana. I am a resident of Laramie, and I support this. I'm thankful that you guys are doing this tonight, and I'm not going to take too much time, but I am getting hung up a little bit on the fees, but I really appreciated what one person said before me, a few people before me, about if paying the fee if the complaint turns out to be false or not needed to be fixed. I like that idea. Or if it needs to be fixed, it going on to the landlord. And I don't really like the idea of registering fees. I don't know. I understand why it's necessary, but again, that's just going to be something that increases the rent for renters. Other than that, I am really supportive and thankful that you guys are doing this tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Next screen name is Steve Grabowski. I'd like to admit Steve Grabowski into the meeting. Mr. Grabowski, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I am against this ordinance. I think it's way too draconian. As a landlord, I always repaired things when repairmen couldn't be reached. I was in construction for years. I studied electrical engineering and repaired all kinds of electrical items. You want to ease the housing shortage and lower costs. How about making it easier for me to rent my apartment out, not harder? The expenses necessary to meet restrictions and the destructiveness of many students especially have kept me from opening my apartment to 3 or 4 people for numerous years, contributing to the housing shortage. Now, if housing is really too expensive, have you seen Fort Collins, by the way, and Greeley and Loveland and all those places? We are much less expensive than those places. If we're too expensive or rare, you want to solve it by continually making landlords' expenses increase dramatically? Hey, don't blame us, landlords. Try looking in the mirror. And I would suggest that complaints about renters would also be heard by council. Destruction by drunken students and guests have discouraged me from opening my property for years now. They kicked in my antique doors. You can't go down to Lowe's and buy a 1880 vintage door in an odd size. You just can't. It's destroyed. It's over. 6-foot graffiti on the south side of my building that cost me $600 to have it removed. I had an entire tall hallway graffiti. This was, 30 years ago. And then the paint tracked throughout the house. It took me about 100 hours personally to fix all of this. Bathtubs overflowed, water flowing through the floor downstairs, destroying merchandise and my store, causing major damage. And then there's a complaint against me, and I'm threatened with a lawsuit. All this runs the costs up. hence the rents go up and complaints about the rents. I think that there's more to this than has ever met the eye. I agree a lot with a lot of what's been said already, but this needs to be totally re-engineered or thrown out. Thank you very much.
Okay, next public comment. Screen name, and if I get this wrong, I apologize. Zelena L, and I just ask for you to provide your full name for the public record, and welcome, and you have the floor. The audio is not coming through just yet. Oh, I think I hear something now.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Mayor? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, Miss. So thank you. So my name is Zelena Leon, and I am actually a new resident here in Laramie. And I actually just found out about this meeting less than 24 hours ago, but I felt so strongly about this, and I felt I needed to give my input here, just from my recent experience moving into Laramie. And so, and I think this might kind of help maybe weigh in some options here, but so I'm a young professional, and the reason I moved to Laramie was because I was offered a position here at the university. Initially, it was very hard to find a place at all. It is just, there was necessities missing. I would make the drive to come and look at all places that I was interested in. There were several places where, walls were missing. It's just, I've never really had an experience this bad to the point where it made me rethink the position here. And so we eventually found a place, but we haven't had any great luck here either. Our windows don't lock. I've had to call our plumbing issues about 4 times. I've only been here less than 2 months. So I'm just, and every time I ask for suggestions from long-term people who have lived here in Laramie, I don't get great feedback. I get scared. I don't know where I'm going to go to next. I was actually hoping to start a family here soon in the near future. And now that seems something scary to me, because I don't want to have to bathe my child within 7 minutes before the water runs out. It's been very uncomfortable, and I would love to stay here. I love the small town feeling here. But it's just, the housing is a little worrisome for me, and I don't want to have to leave and make another move. Thank you.
Council members, I'm going to close public comment and go back to the council. Councilmember Somerville.
Mayor, at this time, I move to call the question.
Put a motion to call the question that will require a 2/3 vote of council. It's a non-debatable motion. City Clerk, can we have a roll call on the motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Second from the Vice Mayor. City Clerk, roll call vote.
Cumby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
No.
Harrington.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schmickel.
Yes.
Schuster. Absent. Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 7 yeses, 1 no, and 1 absent, Your Honor.
The motion to move the question has passed. We'll now proceed to the roll call vote on the motion. City Clerk.
Cumby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
No.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster, absent, Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 7 yeses, 1 no, and 1 absent, Your Honor.
The motion carries on first reading. Council, it's 9:54. The last item has been disposed of from the agenda, and by our rules and procedures, we now need to adjourn. City Clerk?
Mayor, the council could make a motion to extend past 9:30 to allow a new item, but we do have to adjourn at 10, sorry.
Thank you, City Clerk, which gives us about 5 minutes. Council, what's your pleasure? Okay, no, I don't see any. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Point of order. Don't we need the public comment?
Councilmember O'Doherty? Councilmember O'Doherty?
Don't we need to do the public comment on non-agenda items, even if we stop doing business?
Correct.
Yes, that is correct.
Correct. The motion to adjourn is pending, but will be addressed after public comment on non-agenda items. Public comment on non-agenda items, items that were not on this evening's agenda. Seeing none. Close the public comment period. Vice Mayor had a motion to adjourn with a sufficient second. All those in favor, say aye. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand or both. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. We are adjourned. Good evening.